please.
Just sat down.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
justice for all.
Okay, may I have a motion to accept tonight's agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, let's start with the highlight of the meeting, which is the recognition of Mr. Whitney.
I'm moving everything tonight.
Yes. And he'll second it as well if he can. Everybody saw them?
They did.
Okay,
They
good.
pass back.
All right, so, do you want to start? Should I start? What do we want to
I'd be glad to start, because I would say one of my entry points to the district was with Mr. Whitney, and that first board interview, and sitting across the table trying to figure this man out and understanding his passion for education, and starting to get a little bit of insight into him being from, Irvington, through and through, and understanding your passion, and very clear from that probably January-ish day in 2012 in a snowstorm in Ardsley, where we were meeting the board. It was clear to see Phil's passion and dedication to the schools, and I think we've seen that be the case. I've seen that be the case for the past 5 years, and serving as an officer of the board for how many years? Was it
3 years.
3 years, vice president for 1 year and president for 2.
Yep.
And your heavy involvement in committee work, from policy committee, buildings and grounds, all the work on communication committee, but someone that was always there for the district and the board through and through. Personally, I certainly want to thank you for being a good partner, and to thank you for all your dedication to the district. Clearly, you've had tremendous impact.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thank you.
So, and to that impact, of course, you know that you are just another brick in the wall. A teacher, leave those kids alone, right? So there's your memento of the brick in the
So
wall.
heavy.
And you also have the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association recognition here.
That's deeply meaningful.
But, yes, it is deeply meaningful. I have to talk personally about my relationship with Phil and how tremendous it's been serving the 2 years that I did with Phil. For me, the most memorable moment was, needless to say, when I was vice president and Phil was president, we had our moments of tiffs and complete disagreements and outright fights. And my favorite story is when he burst out, I don't remember what the phrase was at the beginning, "You can't do it, hon." Of course, Phil was mortified, but I couldn't stop laughing because I realized that, one, we'd gotten so much under each other's skin that we were at the point of fighting like spouses, which also told me in a very crazy way that, in fact, now I was truly a member of the board family, because there's nobody that gets under your skin like a family member or like a spouse. So, and I will say that has been the 2 years with Phil on the board, that has been very much, he actually embraces all of us and welcomes all of us and treats us all like members of the board family, answers our questions. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten atta-girls from Phil, or text messages, or thank yous, or...
Wait, now you're really making me sound sexist. I don't say atta-girl.
Well, okay, I'm calling them atta-girls.
You just
he
stick to
said
hun.
that you stick to hun, yeah. So, though now I have to say, we are going to send you back to your real family, which is Robin. And since Robin has sacrificed and not had you for a few years for dinner, I'd like you to take this gift certificate to Mima's and go have a nice bottle of wine with Robin on a Tuesday night, and think of us, and
Thank you.
and we wish you well.
A caveat, it must be on a
Very
Tuesday.
generous. Wow.
We wish you with, good times with your real family, and your other family will be missing you. So, thank you for all of your support over the years, and we will miss you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. you like. This is getting very embarrassing.
That's so nice.
Yeah, well, I'll give you some.
Give you some.
I got the pleasure of serving 1 year with you, and even prior, having conversations, and I think Chris echoed really, my sentiment is the passion that you have for something that is dear to you is tremendous. It's clear, it's evident, it's engaging in conversations that we have all the time. This year I've gotten to know you even better, and you've been a real mentor, almost, right? A board mentor, so to speak, and it's been very pleasant for me, so I appreciate it. I'm certainly going to miss it, and I look forward to not seeing you on Tuesdays for your sake.
Thank you. I will second the mentor role. As Phil knows, I've thanked him before on many occasions for serving as a mentor, a real mentor, and what that word means and all its implications. I personally, being on the board for the first year and not having a background in education, I certainly needed more mentoring than my colleague here. And Phil, you were always ready to meet for coffee or pick up the phone or a text or answer a question, where to find a document, how to understand it, how to approach it, how to look at the issue. And it's really not only made the job more understandable and is clear, but more enjoyable. So I personally would not have enjoyed this year nearly as much without your friendship, without your mentoring and leadership. I think you're a great leader, even if you're in the head role or sitting next to me. So thank you for all of that.
I would like to add a word or two as well. I think, it's quite something. We were just walking into the meeting, and it's a beautiful day, and you're looking out and feeling pretty amazed at the campus as we have it. But you're leaving here with an administration in which nearly every person that is leading the district in our schools, in fact, I would just say every person, you've been connected to their hiring. So that's a tremendous shift from when you arrived.
Except for Joyce and David.
So now we know
Joyce
who's
and
blamed.
David. Okay, so there's two.
Both were tenured.
Nearly two. Tenured under
Oh,
your,
right.
there we go.
And David was tenured on your watch. Yeah.
There we go. So thank you for that. Little assist. You fought long and hard, and we have a strategic plan. The buildings and grounds, as we were observing, are in far better shape thanks to the hard work that you helped lead. Our finances, with the great leadership we have, but your observation, tough questions, and just ever observant about how we're doing. Our finances are in great shape. Most importantly, in discussions, you often ask that core question: how does this better serve our students? How does this help the kids? I think what I've appreciated is you have been a friend and a mentor, but I've also appreciated that 6 years in, you've continued to grow and evolve and keep that curiosity about what makes our schools work. And I think that's always important to bring every day to this role. And I think you're a true Irvington, and you've given back as much as this community has given to you, and that's really special. So I have a brick for you to take home. Please don't open it here.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Now
Thank
you
you
just
all.
made us look bad.
Yeah.
I will say just
Stage with this.
a couple of words. Thank you very much for all your extremely kind words to me. Thank you for the gifts as well. I've really enjoyed serving for the 6 years. It hasn't always been easy. I've learned a lot, as you say. I've really enjoyed working with Dr. Harrison, Dr. Kaur, and it's been a short but great year with Carol, Ms. Stein, and of course with Elaine, because she has been an integral part of getting everything done in our district. And it's appropriate for me to be retiring when you're retiring. That's good. I think, I won't speak very long because we have to get through our business in an expeditious way, but I think that the main thing is that Irvington was a great community and great district in a very stressful time when I arrived in 11, 12, I guess it was. And some of it was of our own doing, in that the community itself was sort of having a soul-seeking discussion about what direction we should head in as a district, whether we should try to cut our public education funding to the bone, or we should continue what has made Irvington a strong district over the years. And it was difficult to make to make those tough decisions in the beginning, because we did have to respond to what was an incredibly scary economic time. But, you know, things did recover over time, and it made it possible for us to invest a bit in our schools again. But I think that it took a strong board of people that really believed in our schools and believe in public education to make that all happen. It certainly helps having an economy that has done much better over the last 4 or 5 years, because that's given us at least the comfort of knowing that while we are going to keep our tax increases to a minimum, that we are not going to be imperiling people in our community by investing in our schools. But I do want to say that, you know, to this board, it's the most important thing is to work together to solve problems, to work with the administration to solve problems, or to realize opportunities, that to be productive really requires a partnership. And I think that sometimes people forget that they think that an adversarial relationship is somehow going to be successful in moving our district forward. I remember when I ran, there was a strong feeling that it was important to be adversarial with the administration, as though the administration were somehow people disconnected from the caring of our own students. And I can say that in my 6 years, I really discovered just how much our administration and our teachers care about our students. They are so committed to their excellence, so committed to their well-being. It may seem at times that the administration is not always making decisions that are helpful to a single student or even several students. We have lots of rules that we have to live by as a public school. Rules are important. Rules are extremely important, and a lot of times people want us to break rules. But the administration cares about all of our students in a way that is so profound, and I just want our community to know that as a person who's leaving, that is one of the most important things, is to have that partnership with our board and our administration, and working together to continue to make our district stronger and better. So it's been my pleasure to serve, and I look forward to having my Tuesdays back and to not worrying quite as much as I have been.
Now you're here.
Okay, Chris.
All right, so as promised about expediency tonight, I'm going to be the sole voice at this point because Rand and I are going to be speaking a little bit, and then Carol on other topics. But really 3 items I wanted to touch on this evening. The first, we've had some conversation in this room over the past, I'd say probably 3 meetings with respect to the 2017-18 calendar and the guidance that was coming around from the State Department of Education requiring particular changes. I can say that through our diligence and the assistance of our the school district's attorney, that we've been able to get a necessary documentation that will allow us to leave our calendar as adopted in March without any modifications. And then we'll see what comes out of the state's process in reviewing the related regulations and laws in the coming school year. The thing that I think that stands out most importantly here, and I think was worth the time that we took in not jumping and making the changes, even though I had drafts of calendars ready for your adoption, was that it preserves the opportunity for our kindergarten teachers to get to know their children very well in the beginning of the school year with the modified 5-6 days that we have, and there's additional layer of parent-teacher conferences. And it also provides a little bit of reprieve for our elementary teachers at the end of the year as they look to close out the school year. So I'm pleased to report that we will not have to modify the calendar that the board previously adopted. I just did want to mention that the logo update, that we are preparing for some process. I actually have a conference call tomorrow morning with Ruthie office to try to map out some plans so we can look to polish up our winning design and actually get it going soon, and to engage the students. I've been in contact with the kids, and they're eager to be a part of that process. One exciting related note is that, as the board may remember, we bought a new pickup truck at the beginning of this year, and Carol, Gary, and I were meeting with the custodial bargaining unit today regarding some routine business, and as the conversation was ending, they noted that we had a couple trucks that didn't have Irvington on the doors. Would it be all right to go just Irvington UFSD on the doors? And I said, no, you have to wait until we get the new logo completed. So,
Another use found.
so we will see that lovely logo on the side of pickup trucks before you know it. And then finally, that we're like just about done with construction related to the bond project. Thank goodness. Yeah, there's seating tomorrow, the whole area that's going to be our shot put and discus area. And, you know, there's a couple little things that are being worked on behind the scenes, and some tweaks on the irrigation system and things along those lines. But realistically, like, Land Tech is going to be able to start to move out of town in the next week. Seating tomorrow, and all the critical work is then completed.
Great.
I gotta tell you, it's been a long, painful process, but to see that done, and it comes back to, I think, what Phil said before about the board and focus, partnership. You know, you have people like Carol that bent over backwards. You have Phil out there in the rain with me, meeting with neighbors. You know, Gary and all his diligence. We wouldn't have gotten there if there weren't those shared commitments. So we're there. That's about it.
I have to tell you that my daughter texted me just this afternoon. She said, also, you guys should fix the bleachers next to the field.
Everything else looks so good.
There you go.
So I just wanted you to know that
For this-
they are focused on everything we've done, and
Yeah.
they're seeing more opportunities.
Yeah, well, and that was an opportunity, as Deb can attest to, during our Field Projects Committee, which you so capably co-chaired. There were discussions about, you know, broader facility improvements, and while there was discussion about new seating or additional seating, the focus was on the objective of having better playing facilities for our kids, and understanding that may be a consideration down the road.
Definitely.
Oh, that's the Booster Club, right? Okay. Yeah, exactly. So, which leads us now to comments from the community. Does anyone wish to say anything?
Della Lenz. Phil, it was great having you, and, you know, the girls are together, both sets of yours, so we'll be seeing each other for a long, long time.
Thank you.
First, I wanted to say thanks for posting the draft of the BOE handbook. I've been reviewing it. It's very helpful. Thank you very much. I had a question on, with the special ed, number 10.5, when you get to it. It says that his certification is pending. I was just wondering, did he take the test yet? I'm just curious about that, because it's a head special ed teacher, and for children with autism. I know that we've had some teachers hurt, some severely with brain injuries. That's with veteran teachers, and I just want to make sure that we have the safety of our children. I know everybody's pulling for the teacher, but it was scary. And that was a veteran teacher. So when it says pending, I'm just curious if what was his name? Daniel Liptak, if he even took his test yet. And what if he fails?
So what's the?
So it's not an uncommon practice that you employ somebody that's in the process of certification. We look at Mr. Liptak, who has a number of years of experience working in similar capacity, proven track record of success, and someone that we're actually very enthusiastic about inviting to the district. I can tell you that Mr. Liptak has indeed taken the necessary tests, and we're waiting the results. As in any case, if we had a situation where someone's certification did not come through, we're prepared to go out and continue a search as appropriate.
Okay, so we know that he took his test, and we're just waiting.
We do our diligence.
Okay. Just something for the board to consider with because we have had significant injuries to teachers. The most recent one, really, like, it breaks your heart. I just want to look out for the safety of our teachers and ensure, and these are veteran teachers, to ensure that they're safe. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so I guess we can get into the handbook discussion. Did anyone have any comments that, based on the handbook, the governance team handbook? I know there were some questions around the goal setting. Do you want to discuss that now, or in the goal setting, goal structure discussion?
I think we'd be best served having the conversation within the confines of this, because I think that kind of shapes the following dialogue.
All right, so,
So just maybe, just to bring everybody up to speed, so in the last meeting, which I did not attend, the board had a discussion about this document. We then subsequently received comments, which Deb and I, are intending to integrate into this document. But at that time, Catherine, you raised a very important question about how the board should consider its role in setting goals for the district, because obviously now with the strategic plan, we do have the opportunity to have long-term goals, but generally speaking, we've also, as a board, attempted to set short-term goals, which are usually 1 or 2 years. And it's also NYSBA, New York State School Board Association, sort of best practice that a school board would play that role in setting annual short-term goals. How we go about doing that is not described really in NYSBA policy. It's really kind of up to us how we go about doing that. And I think the part in this document was simply to say that it is our responsibility, and then leave it sort of open to exactly how we should do it. But you raised an important question, which is whether we should be setting short-term goals, or whether the administration should be essentially setting short-term goals that are an extension of the long-term goals.
and I guess for me, it was the definition, so I look at the board as a policy-making body and as the setting the strategic vision. I don't look at it as a body where we turn to the administration and say, we want you to focus on X, Y, and Z, and we want you to achieve this much by the end of the year. I think the goals that you sent around that Westport had done were a good example of, so for instance, you could have a board goal be, we want you to improve academic performance of the students, and then let the administration come back and say, under that overarching strategic objective of improving academic performance, here are the things that we believe will achieve that. One, professional development, and under professional development, we will have 80% of our teachers go through metamorphosis or whatever, so that the administration sets quantifiable, measurable goals that feed into that high-level goal. But the board is not setting that quantitative goal. It's the board is setting the high-level goal, and the administration is saying, well, this is what we'll do to achieve that high-level goal.
So just to be clear on what you're saying that the administration develops its goals based on the board's goals?
Yes. The administration tells us how, in a measurable, quantifiable way, they will achieve the objectives that the board sets at a high level. So if our goal is improve academic performance, then the administration comes back, and ideally, each of the principals and the administrators come back and say, this is our personal goal that fits into that board, and then there's alignment that board-driven goal, and there's alignment.
But that opens, so are we having a discussion about this?
Yeah, and if I could just ask a follow-up and then we can discuss. So in the way that you describe it, what's challenging in writing this document is if we've already, through the strategic plan, come up with our theories of action, which are tied to the 3 big goals, is our goal setting finished? Because if so, have we already met the responsibility of setting long-term goals? Or is there more goal setting that the board does? Because the attempt on page 2 of the handbook was to break down annual short-term goals that is our responsibility versus long-term goals. And I had envisioned long-term goals to be those that are set forth in the strategic plan. Are you saying that there's also short-term goals that the board is setting, or no?
No, I think the board sets the strategic vision. I believe, and it's certainly been my experience in the corporate world, that goals are better owned by the people and better, you know, say I'm David Cohen, I know on a much deeper level what I need to do to improve academic performance in the high school than the board would likely know. So if I say to myself, as Dave Cohen, I can move this 20%, or I can do this, and through that I can achieve academic excellence that meets the board's goal, then, at least in my experience, in the corporate world, it's much more effective if it's owned at David Cohen's level than if it is top-down driven by the.
You know, my only concern with that is, and I agree, but is to make that high-level goal it's not as simple as saying, you know, we will see academic progress. We need the data. If we're going to set a high-level goal in which they're going to set an aligned goal to data, we need to agree on what the data points are that are available to us.
Well, that's exactly it. So that's where I think the second part of it is the goals, the actionable goals are set by the administration and are quantifiable, measurable, and then approved by the board. So the board says, yes, we think those goals that you've set forth are the right stepping stones to achieve the strategic goals.
Right, so we have to agree on, at that point, then,
yes,
what data we want to use to set the high-level goal that, in turn, the administration is going to set specific measurable goals to.
And I think
Right.
part of that comes back to the partnership that Phil was referencing.
Totally.
And understanding. I think I don't want to lose sight of the points that Catherine was making, is that, and Dave and I say this with respect, you being a colleague as well as a board member with your education background, you certainly have insights into what some of that data may look like. But at the same time, we're speaking more globally, let's say post Dave Graber days on the Board of Education, we want to make sure that those measures of success, whatever those data may be, are true connections with what the objectives are, and that there's that correlation that exists. And in some cases, an objective may be to begin to identify what are appropriate data in a certain area. And as we've had conversation in this forum a number of times, a part of our process in building program, and we'll reference in a bit, is developing the measures along the way. Because there's places that we fully acknowledge that we don't have, that may be all the tools that we want.
Right, and we're working on that, right? I just want to be clear for us as a board, right? I agree, the partnership is vital, right? Just as an example, right? I used this before with the Ames Web at the lower levels where there's very significant reading data. You know, as an example, the district might set a goal that says 80% of second grade students will be reading at or above level I based on the Ames Web and the Fountas and Pinnell running record data that we collect, right? That's a very concrete, measurable, realistic, watch my kids grow at a very formative age. What does that goal look like on our plate, right? And then how does it carry through to middle school, Main Street school?
But that's a perfect example of, on our plate, at a high level, a 50,000-foot level is improve academic excellence or achieve academic excellence. And so underneath that are specific measurable goals for each school, Dallas Lane, Main Street, middle school, but defined by the principals. And that's what I wanted to be careful with, is that, well, I know that you have the, academic understanding of what's available in the schools. Not every board going forth will
Leverage it
have
while you got it.
I'm sorry?
Leverage it while you got it.
Well, yeah, no, exactly, but the point is, we don't want to encumber future administrations or, where the
Well,
boards.
I'm worried about that, because does that mean if there's not an educator on the board going down the road that this disappears?
No, no, no,
So
no,
how do
no,
you
no,
sustain
no,
that then?
it's the same thing. It's, the goals are still set, still are
But how do you
measurable, still are approved by the board.
So
That meet but maybe we don't dictate exactly what the measurements are.
we shouldn't be dictating what the measurements are. I totally agree with that. That's
Okay,
for
good.
the professionals to do.
Right.
But we're gonna set one that has to align with across all levels at the school. We have to be very, as a board, and a future board, we have to be very sure of, when we say something like that, what that actually means. And so that there is a partnership, like, the administration doesn't come to a board and put something out and be like, well, we weren't expecting that. What is that? How does that define academic excellence, right?
So last year, yeah, exactly. And so, but I think we tried this last year, and I acknowledge 100% that it was an experiment that was maybe not as strong as it should have been. But I do think that if we can come back in September after the work the administration's done on their retreats with the administrators, the principals, that hopefully the first session in September or the second session in September is, here are our goals for the year, here's the measurements that we have in place, and the board can look at them and say, yes, that's very much in alignment with our strategic plan. We approve those goals, and that's what we go forward.
Can I just interject just for 1 second? So the practical issue in front of us is the editing of this to make it sort of consistent with the board's overall desires, right? So Catherine has a point of view which is similar to this, but there is a important difference, which I think, if you read the sentence, in carrying out its responsibilities, this is page 2. And I'm just, because it's really one sentence, right? In carrying out its responsibilities, the BOE, as an entity, shall set annual short-term goals, taking into account administrative recommendations.
See that?
So, I'm just wondering, from an editing standpoint, if it's still is it still our responsibility to set the goals, but maybe not taking into account, but maybe something that's more directly integrated with, aligned with
the
right.
administration goals.
Would that be?
So for me, that makes me anxious is both setting annual short-term and long-term goals.
Right.
Feels as though the administration is being told what to do by the board. And that we're setting the goals, and I could see future boards saying, not only am I gonna set your goals, I'm gonna tell you how to measure them, and I want, to have you report back to me at the end of the year. That's the micromanagement I would like to avoid. I would like it to be, at least, again, this is just my thought, and it doesn't have to be yours, that the board sets the high-level goals in alignment with the strategic plan, the strategic vision, and then the administration sets the goals that match up to
So do you want us to strike number 2 altogether?
Yes, she does. I mean, the way I'm reading
Just
it is
rewrite it, not
first it
strike
should
it.
be, 1 should be primarily act as a policy-setting body. That's the first and foremost responsibility. 2, I think what Catherine's suggesting is what we start off with in number 3. We are to set long-term goals for the district, correct?
Right.
Do you believe it should be based on a needs assessment?
I think it should be based on the strategic vision that has been built by the board. So as we realign the strategic vision over time, that there are things within, so if one of our goals is to enhance the global education of our students, and that, I know that was one of the things in the strategic plan, then the administration should come back to us and say, well, what does that look like at each of the schools?
Yeah, but the first sentence, set annual short-term goals for the district.
Don't look at 2. I think you have to go to number 3.
So,
You wanna go
so then
number
I
three?
was
Start with
thinking,
number
So
3
we invert the two.
so yeah, so then number 3 might be approve the short-term goals
Yeah,
set
that's
forth
exactly where
by
I was
the
gonna go. Yeah,
administration.
You're going to approve, well, let's do number 3 first, because 3 should become 2, because
Right.
first is set
So
long-term goals.
set long-term goals
For the
based
district based
on the strategic vision.
Okay. We don't even need to take into account administrative recommendations.
Just to be clear, the needs assessment isn't 3 to 5 years. The goals are 3 to 5 years
Yeah,
long
so
goals.
we'll strike number 3, which will become number 2. We're gonna all it's gonna say is set long-term goals for the district based on a strategic vision.
Right, and the board, BOE shall monitor, review the progress of these goals and strategies based on adopted timetable. Great.
So, can I just throw out, when I'm looking back at both 2 and 3, I'm wondering if rather than the word set, if the word adopt
Good idea.
is better, because set is very active to me
Yep.
in my mind in the participation of the board.
Okay,
I think adopt is that policymaker standpoint, and set is,
Good point.
Agree.
adopt more aligns with that.
Great.
And then I have one thought when you get to the current number 2.
Okay,
When
so let
you
me
get
just
there.
read it back. So the current number 3 that will become number 2 will read as follows. Adopt long-term goals for the district based on strategic vision, period. The BOE shall monitor and review the progress of these goals and strategies, I think it's probably still okay, based upon an adopted timetable, comma, and reevaluate and adjust as necessary.
I think that's great.
And everything else is eliminated that wasn't read out loud.
Okay.
Michael, is that okay? Okay, so now moving to current number 2, which will become number 3.
Just maybe if I could make a statement here, that something that kind of stood out to me is saying the BOE goals. BOE goals in my mind are something separate and apart. So that should be district there.
I'm sorry, where are we?
The second sentence, it starts with the BOE goals, should be the district goals.
A BOE goal might be to create a.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was
handbook.
looking, I hadn't
Right,
gotten to
right,
that.
governance
Okay.
handbook, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so so number 2 is, number 3 is
The new number 2.
approve administration short-term goals for the district, taking into account
Board recommendations.
The long-term goals, right?
Okay.
Taking into account the long-term goals.
In terms of, if we're writing the language, then I'll make a comment about this at this point, which is that, thank you. Yeah, before you get too far, let me throw in something. Which is, in terms of the language here, the timeline is the fiscal year, July 1st. Maybe that is in action in another district, but in terms of the practical and the partnership
Yep.
of our district, and the fact that in July is when we have new board members coming in, and we talked about encumbering, to have the balance of, I really like kind of what we have in motion now, which is we heard from the principals about the work of the building goals. We are setting in motion the discussion about goals. We'll have the reorg meeting, which includes new board members, and that'll be true in future years as well. And then you do the work as administration in August. So we have an opportunity to have a look at this past year, think about the new year, talk about, what our lessons learned are, and perhaps make suggestions, recommendations for you to consider as the administration goes about making its goals. We then have a presentation by the schools, or presentations by the schools in September. And to me, it seems like we would want to adopt those goals with that back and forth and that partnership in September. And that there's this
Right, so instead of July 1, say September, beginning of the school year.
Yeah, I mean, just the pushback there is just that in our training that we've done over the years, the best practice is for the board to try to adopt the goals prior to the next year. And that's why it said best practice.
But would that be these goals here? If you're thinking about the training, it really is the high-level board goals,
Right.
and the administration goals could come in
Well,
September.
Yeah, I mean, because it was the training, it was
Right.
it was the annual district goals.
Understand.
Yeah. And I get the difference that we're now tweaking apart here, which is awesome.
Right.
Right.
I think it's important for the administration to kind of speak up and say, timeline-wise, does it make sense?
No, I would say, like, you
We
could
should still
say,
try to shoot for July 1,
I think philosophically, you could say definitely the high-level goals are there. I think a lot of the work that you see that occurs during the summer is an extension of current work that's multifaceted, right, multi-years. I think the struggle that we have, and especially in a district our size, is the practicality of thinking that you're gonna be able to have well-developed and articulated goals, looking for measurement by July 1, because we're so deeply in the throes of managing and leading the existing school year. When we get to our next conversation on the subject, like the one area, and they grew out of a question that Deb had asked last week, in looking at, our progress with respect to work within Rubicon Atlas and the development of our units of study. Well, there's a whole audit process that we have to go through and do that, and quite frankly, it would be near impossible to dedicate the volume of time that Raina and the principals are going to undertake to go through and assess where we are, the quality of the work, identify the needs in those areas, to be able to say that we could set the goal by July 1. But to think that I know she's already established days right in the beginning of the summer with each principal for this work, that'll inform our retreat days that we have in August, that then we collaborate and identify the next
It's actually
steps.
preferable to wait.
I think from a practical standpoint, I don't see how, at this point in time, how we would be successful otherwise, because I think we'd be in a position where our goals would be short-sighted and would need
Or they would
adaptation.
be irrelevant because they wouldn't be connected to the actual work.
I think a few things about this. I'm trying to figure out where to start. I want to put it together. So, board creates long-term 3 to 5 year goals, high-level goals, adopts those goals first.
Yep.
Second step is now district creates measurable goals underneath the broad goals that they have. Third step is board now sets short-term goals.
No.
No.
Board,
Okay, so
board approves the goals that they've come up with that are in alignment with the strategic goals.
So that whole conversation that we had about, what am I missing? I feel like I'm missing something.
That's pretty much what, you are missing what they said, that is what they said.
So we set a strategic plan.
Right.
Then we have our, I guess, our annual short-term.
Well, no, then we have the adopt the long-term goals, which is number
Long-term
2,
goals,
that's
right.
in alignment with strategic
Got it.
vision. The board doesn't set the short-term goals. The
No.
board approves the
Approves the
short-term
district's
goals
And we're talking
Year-long
about the
goals.
practical.
that are in alignment with the
district long-term goals. Got it. Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So,
But the practicality of it is that the work is occurring.
correct. So,
Over this spring and summer, and so we should adopt it perhaps in.
so am I hearing the board say that and the administration, Dr. Harrison in particular, say that by August, that process should be ready to kick off the new year?
So what I think you're hearing is that, at least what I'm hearing is that Chris is saying they're so swamped at the end of
Got it.
June that there's no way they
Got
would
it.
have
Got it.
anything coherent.
So-
by
Agreed,
July
so totally agree.
So I look,
And they need to spend time in August to think about this, but then ideally in September, they could come back to us with those short-term measurable goals that we approve.
I just want to make sure we're clear as a board that we're asking
Mike.
the same thing, because we had this conversation 1 year ago, where we all pressed for measurable goals, and we talked about measurable goals, and now we're saying we want them in, am I mistaken that we've been talking about that for a year? Because we've been talking about that for a year.
We've been talking about it for more than a year.
Well, I've been on the board for years, so as long as I've been sitting here, we've been talking about measurable goals. So I just want to make sure that we have a real timeline that's prudent, right, for everybody.
So that's what I was
It's
acknowledging.
fair to the administration to do
I
the
was
work.
acknowledging that last year it was a little bit murky because part of the shift last year was going from board-driven goals to administration-driven goals. And that was part of what the shift I was trying to make, where I feel very strongly that the people who deliver on the goals should own the goals and should set their goals.
Totally agree.
I think Dave will be able to articulate our objective and our intent in the follow-up conversation to this. I almost wonder that, and I'm honestly getting anxious because this is such important work that we're only, the bottom of the second page here. That,
Became the goal discussion.
Well, I think this was really
Yeah,
all
this
that
is-
was,
this
this
is
was
the-
all that was
this is
really
the core of it.
controversial.
This is all we're gonna talk
all right,
about.
so
Yeah.
what my wondering
That's what I thought,
was,
that's why I pressed
my
it.
wondering was if there was some kind of graphic that would identify the flow of this rather than in words. That if there's, a flow
Well,
chart of some sort that may
Step 1,
help-
step 2, step 3.
help,
Maybe like
just
a
a visual
pyramid.
And
to
circles.
bring it to life.
Circles are good.
Oh, I was thinking
Pyramid is
pyramids.
good too.
Some kind of smart graphic.
Venn diagram.
But the end result is what I think I'm hearing again at the end of all that is that by August, we should have a frame of reference for what kind of measures
I
we're
think we're
looking
saying
at
September. The
or
work
September.
occurs in August.
September 1st,
So
right?
the legitimate process is that as I just gave the one example with the units of study, is that, you know, we're closing out the school year this week, and then once, you know, kids and staff are kind of settled and on their own, we start to kind of debrief and process where we are, start to look at what, you know, the benefits of our work have been. And then we have every year a couple-day retreat with the administrative team where we start to really dig in, fine-tune, and define what those next steps are and identify what our goals are. So that work takes place from your administrative team.
By in August.
In August for the ready of the school year.
And,
So again,
and to the point of the discussion that we were having just not so long ago, I think since the strategic vision and the board responsibility includes other things like fiscal responsibility, I would look for those presentations in the fall to also include a presentation from Carol on her goals from the year and a presentation on it from special education for their goals for the year, in addition to the principal goals. I don't know how you guys think of that, but I think that's.
I think it's something for us to process and talk about, because there's aspects. So when you talk about special education as an example, special education isn't an entity unto itself, right? It's overlap and overlaying with everything else that happens. So I think that there's some appropriate reporting structures in and around that. I'm just wondering if it appears this. I have to think about it, whether it appears the same way as
Maybe it's
we're
not goals,
supposed
but some other term.
But it should be. We should be looking for the same achievement. You know, what are we measuring in special education to make sure that we're making progress with our students? What are we measuring in finances to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible?
So, and at the same time, this is a comment that I was gonna make in our next discussion.
We're having it now.
Yeah, we're having it now, so that will be quick. The one thing that I have to sincerely caution everybody, like when you talk about all the measurement, when you talk about, you know, I don't want us to be in the game of just assessment and measurement for the sake of assessment and measurement. We have to have a couple defined areas where we have the capacity to be able to do that work. And when I say capacity, that's the human resources, that's the skill, that's the time to be able to do that work. So, you know, that's an area that we look to grow, and that's a part of our process, and we own that and acknowledge that. But it just, you would step back and be frank, it's overwhelming to sit here, but we're gonna measure this, we want the data on this, measure this, we want the data. And a part of me steps back and thinks, okay, who's gonna do that? You know, so.
No,
But-
I'm talking about the things that you target, like what you target,
be
what your
targeted.
choices are. I mean, there are logical choices that you're gonna have to make, right?
You wanted to bring some clarity before I needed to do the same, right?
Hey, no, and I agree. I just want to finish what I was saying. So the clarity is by September, when we sit down as a board,
In September.
when we sit down as a board, we'll be presented with goals that are set for the year, right? Not just a draft.
By the administration.
By the administration, correct. Not just a draft that we're
That's
gonna
what
work on
we're-
throughout the year.
That's what we do in August.
So, and then what was intended, at least for this year, was that we sit down in September, and then there is a mid-year check in January before the budget is set. To the point of what you were just saying of being overwhelmed of not being able to achieve it, it's a great time to check in January and say, we've got this well covered, this is a big gap for us, and maybe we need an additional person to do X, Y, Z, or to do data management, or to do whatever.
To
And
inform the
then the
budget.
budget can plan, then the board can say, you know, that's a good point, and we'd like you to achieve that, so let's put that in the budget for next year, to get that resource, so that we don't run into the same thing next year.
And I have
And
to
that's
say-
why it was intended
Yes.
to be that way.
Yes, and I want to say that I think one of the challenges when you think about informing, there's going to be things that are emergent and things that kind of hit you in the face that like, we need to do this budget-wise. And using like facilities, it's a much more dry cut, clean cut example. When we're talking about education, developing programs and that level of progress, that's something that it's hard to say by January, you know, when you're only halfway into the school year, that's going to be real clear to you. So a lot of times, those types of discussions that happen, that come up with program and resource asks pertaining to education, those are things that are oftentimes brewing for a year or two, just because of the point in the year in which we are when we're starting to have those discussions.
Can I just raise one more important point relative to the timing of an August sort of development by administration, and then presumably shared either at the August 22nd meeting or the first meeting in September, that the discussion of goals as they're connected to measurement or not, it's really important to have that discussion in public, and of course it would be in public, but I think that if it's too early in August, there's nobody here, right? So you just have to be mindful of the fact that in order for community members to sort of comment on it, be aware of it, participate, I think it's important to have that discussion in the first week in September, but then there might even be some important meetings that you would have where you somehow share this through a town hall, like, because we used to do more of them, and I know that it's time consuming to do it, but you have like a forum, like when Dr. Kaur explained Common Core to so many parents over so many meetings and so many years, that was very helpful, but you would actually take the time to really explain to community members about what these goals are and what they mean. And because I think the problem is if it's done in August, then no one's even going to have a
I think we were saying
This
September,
is,
though.
this is with the administration doing the work. I mean, to add a bit more nuance, I would love at our August meeting for you to be able to give us an update about, hey, this is the work we've been doing, this is where we're at, and we'll have our presentations for you about the goals in September, so that we have an inkling of where we're headed, that there's no big shift, that's a confirmation of what we've already been talking about at the end of the year. And that at that point, when we hear from you in September, school's back in session.
Right.
And at that point, there's no surprises. This is a timeline.
I have to look at time. I hear your point, and I think it's a valid point, because I think you could almost say, on the other end, you say, well, we're already into September, work's underway, conversations are happening with teachers.
Right.
So I understand your point, and I think what it comes down to is a part of it being very strategic, and when that board meeting is placed in August, to have us in a position where we can
I think.
have some of that dialogue.
Okay, so can I make one suggestion, because it would help, I think, Phil and I, if I could read back what I have as the new number 2 and a new number 3, and if you, not to wordsmith it, but if something jumps out that is not what we're all in agreement on, it would help move this process along. Is that okay, Dr. Harrison? Okay. Just a few more minutes. So, because one of the things also I just want to double check is the short-term goals. Are we going to call them?
I would say, why don't we, rather than short-term goals,
Okay,
I would say to me, it would be, I would say district goals.
Well, that,
Annual district.
Annual
Annual
goals.
district
I just
goals.
took out
that's
short-term.
exactly what I was
Yep.
worried about.
district
Okay,
goals.
annual district goals, yeah. And also, and they're not school goals, right? When it's
Those are
short-term.
District
subheadings
goals.
of.
I would say district goals
Okay,
that
so
are
this is-
operationalized in the schools, is
Right.
the logistics.
So the new number 2 is going to go something like this. Adopt long-term district goals based on strategic vision. The Board of Ed shall monitor and review the progress of the district goals and strategies based upon an adopted timetable and reevaluate and adjust as necessary.
That's number 2, correct.
Does anything jump out? No? Okay.
No.
Number 3, approve annual district goals aligned with strategic vision set by administration. Approve annual goals aligned with strategic vision.
Should it always be district in that sense?
Yeah, that's what
That
I-
are
I don't
aligned.
Because we'll
And
possibly
do
talk
we
about
say,
other types of
and
goals.
the one thing I get hung up on, keep hearing strategic vision, do we want to say strategic goals?
Yes, in that case, it would be aligned with the strategic goals,
That's
because the
exactly-
strategic goals are aligned with the vision, so it's the
I
vision.
don't know,
it's the
that's why
goals.
I'm that's why I'm,
Yes.
it's
So-
jumping out at me, it's not what we're, yeah, so just one more time, so approve annual, and is it still district
Annual district goals
Yes.
aligned?
that are aligned with the strategic
Strategic
vision,
goals.
with the strategic goals,
It should be the strategic plan.
strategic plan, there you go.
Yeah, you spent an enormous amount of time on that plan.
Yeah,
That's
thank
the
you.
whole point of it.
Okay,
It's the
yeah.
anchor, right?
Okay, so approve annual district goals aligned with strategic plan, okay? And then we're gonna put in set by administration?
Yes, I do think they should be set by,
Annual
set-
district goals aligned. with-
Developed by
I was
administration?
going to say develop.
Developed and then we approve it.
Yeah, well, that's the second line, okay, so developed by, okay, so approve annual district goals aligned with strategic plan and developed
As
As
developed.
developed, sorry, as developed by administration. And then the second sentence of that would be, Board of Ed shall monitor, assure alignment to, and we can either use the word measure or assess the progress of the, not short-term.
The annual goals?
The annual district goals.
Is the board, so part of it is from a practical standpoint, is the board truly monitoring it, or is the board receiving reports or updates on the
There you go.
progress? Because the monitoring, again, is very active and hands-on.
Right.
Board
The
of
board
Ed-
shall require updates, the board shall receive. To me, it sounds more,
There you go. Yep.
more friendly than
Yes.
require.
Yes.
Shall receive reports.
Progress updates as per whatever it said about the
Progress.
scheduled timeline or whatever.
Updates, okay, so hold on. So the Board of Ed shall receive progress updates. Do we want to add from the administration?
Yes.
On an adopted timetable.
Yeah, well, I have to say it, then, do we want to say, and assure alignment to, and assess
To me,
the
that's,
progress of?
that's.
Didn't you say that in the first sentence?
I was gonna say, to me, I thought that was already
Okay,
identified.
Dave, there are chocolate chip cookies in the back of the room.
Thanks.
bear with me, because otherwise we'll just go around and around. The Board of Ed shall receive progress updates from the administration. And now, do we want to go into measure or assess the progress of?
So, progress updates that will include measures of success? I don't know.
To receive progress updates from
Because it's the administration that has to set the measures of success and then report.
We could just
on
say
their
based on an
achievement.
adopted timetable.
Yes, you could say based on an adopted timetable.
Okay, I think I can work from that. Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Great job.
Really, I agree. yeah.
And I just want to say
I'm
that this
impressed.
has been quite a commitment, and kudos to both of you, and, and I think the board and I, during our last retreat mid-year, kind of turned and pushed this on Deb and Phil. So
They volunteered.
They were volunteers.
My memory is that they volunteered. They raised their hands and said, we'll
I
take it
think I
on.
remember a suggestion happening.
And speaking of volunteering, so now is a good time to say,
Yes.
I've also volunteered to continue to help.
Yes.
It's a great time saying it.
Oh, you're saying that out
Over
loud.
the summer, because although Deb is extraordinary at doing what she just did.
She is taking it with her to China, you
It
know.
does take two, because we have to integrate the comments and edits from you guys and get that into a final document for you to review on August
And
26th.
so we can continue, because we don't want to take all night, we can
Yeah,
continue
no,
additional
we're done,
comments.
yeah, no, we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think with those changes, I'm
You're
good. Thumbs up.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
You pull up the full.
cool. Look at that.
What makes less sense is that the cookies are over there. That makes less sense.
Okay.
They're not moving.
All right, so we can move
I'm gonna have to
on.
get
Not that one.
Yes, we can move on to our priorities discussion.
Did we just have it?
I'm gonna eat 'em.
Yeah, well, I said I think we had a lot of it.
Good.
All you, babe.
But Raina and I put some time
No,
into
don't bring them
preparing
to me.
this discussion, so I think we'll move through.
So out of consideration for the time and effort you put in, we'll put,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
no, Raina. Oh, no.
Honestly, it's fine. Yes, ma'am.
Get us X out.
Not good.
Even I know that.
Yeah, yeah.
I noticed it's still not Irvington
Good to
green.
have
I just want you to notice.
It actually, I gotta
This is
tell you,
off-brand,
The printer?
yeah,
off-brand.
yeah. Well, I honestly wanted to, once we have our logo, I wanna develop a custom,
I've sent the numbers around.
slide template for us to use, so. So Raina and I are gonna go through this rapidly. I think we touched on a lot of this, and some of the points that I wanted to make were comments that I interjected along the way. And I think Catherine referenced some of this when we think about our history and our journey to kind of get to where we are. I would say there's been a struggle, to say the least, and I think Catherine kind of referenced where we were in that process this year, that I think it's kind of delivered us in a position where I think we're going to be more aligned to be able to satisfy and meet expectation along the way. But quite frankly, there's been struggle in the alignment and what the focal points are in that whole process. And in that process, one of the challenges that the board hasn't been able to commit to goals of its own along this journey. In that process, the district obviously has continued to move forward, and we've done that through work that you've come to know in the last few years, and thinking about the work of the theories of action and really how that lays beneath everything that we do in the district, that we've developed a strong practice of developing building level goals that grow from the theories of action and name what the specific works are and what the outcomes of that work may look like. And then, of course, now the insertion of the strategic plan in that process. This year, and I think, again, Catherine referenced this, that there were, when we go back to September, there was a goal presentation. We had the touch point in the middle of the year in January for some updates, which linked then to budget, and then our June goal updates. Through our process, and I think we talked about it after that very long meeting earlier this month, that we're looking to revamp what that may look like. We continue to provide updates along the way. So we had, as referenced, there's a strategic plan presentation, the annual student performance report, which again was an evolution from where we've been in the past. The ongoing reports that we've provided from Raina and myself. Raina gave a couple comprehensive presentations, one on curriculum development and the other on social studies work, which has been quite a focus for us, or is becoming the focus. Raina, I don't know if you want to kind of speak to this because it talks to some examples of the work.
Sure. So in an effort to sort of create a structure and define, what our work looks like, this chart maybe was helpful to break down the work that we do into professional learning, our practices, and our programs. So these three pieces work together. So when we talk about measurable goals, there are sort of a time and place for measurable goals. So I would say that there's clearly a challenge in defining in a given year when those goals are being set and how to measure certain goals. I believe it was at one of the most recent presentations that I talked about, and I know that this was a sad moment, that real change takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Some people say actually 7. So sometimes we want to know how something's going to change our students' lives, but the reality is we're only in that first column. We're only at the point of maybe doing the professional learning work, or we're at the point of selecting a program or making a decision about where to go as a district. I think certainly our PLTW work in STEM, I think we were very clear that we needed to make a commitment. We had no STEM program. We basically had a course at the high school. And so when you look at where we are now, it's considerable growth. So I don't know how you would define that and measure that, but I think right now when I sit here and I look back and, yeah, we're proud. I mean, next year we're going to add PLTW to 5th grade. We have a pretty significant STEM program in a pretty short period of time.
So Raina, so hold that thought. So this was something we discussed with Chris, I think it was just Michael and I, when we were debating how we put in measurable goals. So that's a perfect example of if, in fact, at the board level, the goal is to increase the level of STEM teaching. Mm-hmm. A measurable goal could be expand, in this year, expand PLTW to the 5th grade.
Agreed.
Right?
And I can build on what you're saying. So if you think back to this last budget season, where we requested a second technology teacher, which, did not make it into the budget. And the purpose of requesting the second technology teacher for the elementaries was so that we could continue to grow PLTW at the other grades.
I thought the second technology teacher did make it into the budget.
Oh, then I better go out and advertise for it.
Special technology?
No, I'm kidding.
I thought-
No, it did not. It didn't make it.
No, we had, in the end, when we tweaked and bent and borrowed some things, we made some adjustments that allowed us the opportunity to expand PLTW. But in doing so, we used money to purchase materials and to pay for PD and tweak the existing staff.
Right. So, and that was, by the way, that was a fine solution. I mean, just because we say it and just because we set that goal, I mean, there's going to be a reality every year to setting goals and naming expectations. Just because we say it doesn't make it so.
But if that is part of the strategic vision, then we should be aligning the budget and our goals and our hiring to the strategic plan.
Let me just finish this thought, though. Let me just stay with me for one more second on this. So I understand that, but I also think that there's a practical, from year to year, we don't know tax cap. There's so many things we don't know. So honestly, I think we ended up with a great solution this year. I think we're all thrilled that we're expanding our STEM-based program, which was what was our commitment to do that. And I think we found a way to do it. So I also would say that needs change and shift. So I would hate to say that we're gonna set a path in place and in 3 years, we're gonna be so rigid and stick to it in such a way that we're not thinking flexibly, because I don't think that that would ultimately help us reach our goals as well. The reality also is that things change, and needs change, and kids change, and so we set a path, and that's why, Catherine, I love when you talk about those high goals, because there's lots of ways to get there. And we can't always name how we're gonna get there every single year for the next 3, but we can certainly say that we have a goal to get there. So I would just like us, to, when I hear you talking, I want us, for me, I would like to know that we're gonna remain flexible in our thinking about how we're gonna reach those goals.
And I think
So I'm
there's-
sorry, David.
No, I was just gonna add, like, go ahead, Chris.
And I was gonna say, I think there's a middle road, and I think what you're saying isn't all that different, in that you have those longer range objectives. And the idea of a truly powerful plan is one that's gonna be able to adapt to what the changes in our environment may be, whether that's finances, whether that's other emergent student needs, some state ed requirement that comes down that requires funding, whatever the case may be. That we still have that target, but we recognize that there may be something that's gonna, steer us left or right once in a while.
The one thing Catherine made me think about, so just as a theoretically, because I know you don't like these numbers, but they're only the ones I have in front of me. I preface by saying that 74% of the students in middle school last year were proficient in mathematics, level 3 or 4. 21% kids were level 2, 5% kids were level 1. Metamorphosis is in the middle school. Costs a great deal of money. Lucy's very expensive. Her people are,
It's only in 8th grade, I just want.
Okay, so I can pull up the 8th grade numbers, but you get the gist of what I'm saying, right? And I think, Catherine, this is sort of where you were heading a little bit, but it can be measurable to the sense of tying. We use metamorphosis in the 8th grade. How do we look at the 8th grade, whatever data point you choose to look at or we want to look at, and we say, okay, so we're going into the year with 74% of 8th grade, 26% of 8th graders are below proficiency, right? What does that mean? We look at those kids and we say, does the work that we do in school match that? I mean, we look at these kids and then we say, well, how do they grow based on the professional development that the teacher's getting and the work that they're implementing, right?
It's
Like,
not realistic, and
I disagree very strongly.
Let me tell you why. So the reason why I would say it's not realistic is as a result of our metamorphosis work next year, a teacher will get 1 coaching cycle, 3 times. So not only do we have a lot of kids opting out, so I'm not even sure how accurate that data is, or data are.
Whatever the data point may be.
Well, that's fine, but I guess then I'll just go back to what I said. It's not as simple as that, because the measurement of how much professional learning someone is getting, I don't expect, maybe this is a better way to say it. So the way that we reach success is not through one point of entry. So I would like to say that we are reaching increasing levels of achievement through a lot of different ways. Curriculum alignment, having more clearly defined units of study, making sure that we're including teaching thinking as part of our classroom practice, and we're not only looking for kids to just give us the answers. So there's a lot of pieces. So metamorphosis is one piece. And so it would be very sad to me if we said, okay, well, we used metamorphosis this year, and yeah, it's definitely expensive, and we didn't see the level of we didn't see the level of growth, so now we don't think that metamorphosis is actually.
Well, that's not what I'm suggesting, Rita.
No,
What I'm suggesting is that you've invested in professional development for 8th grade and higher in mathematics, right? I'm just using whatever measure you want to choose, whether you used your in-house, assessments that you've developed, right, that you're tracking. You have the data that connects to the professional development. I really disagree.
Development, right?
Right.
And so, and that's a part of our process, is to develop, that's stage 2, right? That we're looking at development of assessment here.
Right.
But could you have it if in fact, if it's not necessarily tied to student scores because it's a long-term, multi-year activity, could you have it that we believe that in improving student academics, which could be the strategic goal, is that we believe investing in professional development, and investing in professional development means that by the end of the year, 100% of our math teachers would have gone through at least one course of
So,
Yes.
and we
metamorphosis.
actually,
And that's where
Yeah.
we're gonna go next, Catherine, but that feels really different to me than looking at student achievement scores
It's
after
completely
a teacher
different.
a teacher has been
It's
through
completely
one
different.
coaching cycle. And that, what you're describing though, Dave, is sometimes what worries me when I hear these conversations, that That's fine, but I want to just make sure, and I'm happy to do this. I think you all know me well
Of
enough.
course.
I'm happy to explain exactly what we're getting for this, but I think sometimes and Dave, you sometimes know more than other people. So again, I just want us to be careful that just because it says BARD up there or metamorphosis, if you really want to talk about measuring something, then I'd like to talk about and I mentioned this at the last meeting, the implementation of the math modules, where we have now had 5 years of professional development. We have an in-house math coach. We look at data. We look at real-time data of really how our students do it. That, for me, would feel like a comprehensive way to use data around student achievement. If we're just going to pick and choose and highlight professional learning.
It was just an example.
I just want us to be cautious.
I was just giving, no, what you just said is exactly what I'm saying, right? Like,
So what is the real-time student data that we could mesh with this to say?
Well, not with
We have some
metamorphosis.
measurable.
Well,
No, so we have some measurement.
Yes, so if we now go back, right, so if you were to look at probably a slide from 4 years ago when we were introducing, when we added Christine Rosner as a math coach, and we were talking in more broad terms, this is the professional development. Well, now we have the actual work. So yes, in the fall, I would love to talk to you about our math work and how we use mid-module assessment and summative assessment and formative assessment to actually inform what teachers are
right,
doing.
but I'm
So
curious
so that summative assessment can we show
what the impact
progress
is on
with-
students.
Yeah, what has happened to our students during that time period? So all this money that we've invested, what is the end result? Has it been money well spent, or has it been money that maybe could have been invested elsewhere?
Right, so I think that that's a fair question, and right, what I'm saying is, in that area, I feel that we have valid data points and valid approaches that we could come to you and present
Great,
information.
great.
That feels tangible. So if we turn back the hands of time, if we're really gonna look to use data and use valued data and valuable data, then it comes from development of program. So we have now started to look at, we've set a goal around our world language program that speaking is our #1 goal. Not that we don't do reading and writing, we believe in reading and writing, we believe in grammar, but what we hope for all of our students is that they graduate from Irvington High School having some fluency in speaking a language, not only being able to write the language or read the language.
Speaking and comprehending.
Speaking and comprehending. So in shifting that goal, we've started to look at how can we assess our students on a regular basis so that we know what are we seeing from Spanish 1 to Spanish 2 to Spanish 3, who are the students who are ending up in AP Spanish or AP French. So again, we're developing that program, and by developing the program, we've identified our data. And that's how we should be developing all of our programs. But just to say, well, let's collect data, I think it doesn't work that way. It has to happen through the development of a program.
So, I mean, I think we're saying at a high level that we'd like to see it, and it's to you to define how that looks.
Exactly.
And name the areas where we're ready.
Right, I mean, looking at these programs of
As a
advisory.
start, right,
I'm
it
sorry, just 1 second. So, looking at the programs of advisory, PLTW, character building, freshman writing, these are all very different, and you would measure them or assess them differently.
Yes.
But that is, looking at the strategic plan here, and what you were saying is to evaluate new and existing programs. So, I guess part of what I'm wondering is, when do we start to hear that language, that we have this program and here's how we're, and I truly believe, in all these programs that that we have or practices, that we have to give them time to develop, and I think that's good expectation setting for us. But still, along the way, like you did with foundations or any other, any of these other ones, you've been giving us indicators, and then hopefully after a period of time, you can give us a real deep dive.
I mean, the funny thing is, Michael, when I hear you say that, is what often happens, if I think back on these last 5 years, what often happens is we're always reporting to you on what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, in terms of knowing, in terms of looking and measuring progress, we should be reporting to you on things we started 4 years ago, but they kind of go away, right? It's like, well, what are we doing now? So if I think about what the principals present on, right, everything we're doing is, this is what's going on in our schools today. But the programs that we've started and developed sort of end up down by the, fall off the table because we're telling you what our current work is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that that's a good point, right? Maybe it's a shift in how we present and what we present. So I think that that's good food for thought for us.
Right, because I mean, and again, going back to the one number that we have in front of us, right? Which I chose math to use as an example because you used the Engage New York curriculum, which is directly aligned to the state exams, whether we believe in them or not. clearly the district has made the investment to align that for, reasons that I think are very sensible. We have 26% of kids who are not meeting standards, right? And so for us to be able to continue to invest in those things and to continue to represent the community and talk to the community about how the programs are working, and Lord knows, Lucy Metamorphosis does incredible work in developing teachers, so we should begin to, over time, whatever that amount of time might be, see a progress, a payoff. Like, I know when I send my teachers to professional development, it's with the expectation that they come back and they put it into use, and how that use gets tracked could be months, could be years, could be whatever it is, but, right, I mean.
Yeah, I guess what I'd like to hear when we come back, we'll meet several times before then, but when we're getting into September and having discussions, I would like for you to name it for us. We have this program that's been, that we're introducing, and here's how we think we might look at it, and obviously you can come back later and say, well, we decided that didn't work, we're gonna measure it in a different way. And here's another program we've had around for a while, and here's how it's looking. And really be clear to us that you are,
That's fair.
evaluating it.
And I would also like to see how these align with the strategic plan. So as I look over here, Michael, we will support educators through targeted professional learning. So that's a good goal. And then under that, you have metamorphosis, BARD, whatever, math coach, writing coach. There, the other goals around, providing students with a diversified curriculum. So aligning the programs that you're doing so that we see how they flow down from the strategic plan.
And I think as we get to the end of this discussion here, when we talk about the topics that are out there, it's that there's a piece to which during the year that I fully expect that we're going to be talking about a build out of the plan and more clearly aligning all these pieces, because where we were this year was the framework and linking the plan to the theories of action, the existing initiatives, and finding that alignment. So I think the next step is making that a broader effort too. So that's on the
Okay.
list.
Can I make one comment? Because I've been listening and thinking, and the one thing I do want to say about the chart is it did change my thinking tremendously about reaching and attaining a goal such as elevating student thinking and learning, because when I originally came into this role, I would have thought the only way to measure it is what score a child got on a Regents and what score they may have got on some other standardized AP exam. But really, when I look at it this way, a different way to measure the progress and whether we've elevated student thinking is looking at having, say, a freshman. Not only did she get stimulated, say, in a science class, but she was also inspired to take a PLTW engineering class because the science pointed her in a direction, or she signed up for character building facilitator, or she also wanted to do an elevated math class. That's not a raw number, but it also shows that we've achieved the first goal because we took a freshman who maybe was in an introductory biology class, and by sophomore year, we kind of exploded the brain, and now she's trying different things. It doesn't really only mean that she got a 90 on a Regents exam at the end of biology. So I think when you put it in charts and you actually show that there's different aspects to evaluating the student and whether we were successful or not, it helps to see it like that. It helped me, and that's all I want to say, is that I hadn't thought of it that way before. I was really looking at it as scores on an exam, and I was expecting to see scores, but now I see what you're saying.
And I think there's two things that I could say to that. So thank you, because I think the goal is always right. The goal is always how can we communicate in a way that's helpful, right? That's always the goal. And so what I would say is, we are not dissimilar from most of our fellow communities of high-achieving school districts in Westchester. That there aren't we don't assess, give these, and I see it when our teachers come from New York City, the way that they use data is different, the way that they assess is different, because what you're describing it's what makes teaching and learning hard to measure, because it is hard to name that, and it's different for every child, right? So for that one child who who explored into like a PLTW program, next year we're adding another AP or portfolio course in our art department. I don't remember the last time that we ran 2 sections of AP portfolio. I mean, to me, that really speaks to the fact that we're expanding a program like that. That doesn't get a lot of talk, but I love that more of our kids are accessing our art program. So I think that's always the struggle. How do we say how advisory? It'll take us years to figure out if there are moments in the advisory program in the middle school that ultimately supported kids as becoming CBFs in the high school, right? But
What's a CDF?
that's our challenge.
Building facilitator, or they wanted to be a peer leader,
They wanna be a peer
or they
leader.
went outside the district and
Yeah.
actually took part and signed up for something else they wouldn't have
But
because
that's
that
measuring.
program was available.
That's right.
So I just wanted to say that put it in a different light for me.
Yeah.
Well, that's measuring also in my book.
That is measuring, yeah.
It is measuring, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of it as a measurement before.
And
So,
it's set as
I
the,
just actually
criteria.
have one comment,
Yeah.
sorry, because I haven't spoken at all, and it's my last chance. Since
Oh.
I-
Let me
You
write
can
that
come
down.
back to that microphone.
Oh, shush.
So, since I've been on the board, we've struggled with this issue of measurement, and I think that the importance of defining goals in a measurable way is that it tells people what we are aiming for in a very clear way. So, over the years, you've explained what you're trying to accomplish, but you've rarely explained it in numerical terms for a variety of different reasons. And I think we're sort of on the cusp of being able to do that. And I would just encourage you to kind of keep pushing through to that, because also it tells the community and ourselves and the staff what choices we're making, right? So the choice, and using Dave's example of the 24% of the students who are not proficient, if we're using that example and say we're really focusing on trying to make them to get to 100% proficiency, it may not be possible, but in the effort to get to 100%, if you got to 95%, you'd be putting yourself in a pretty exclusive club of having 95% proficiency in math, right? And that would change the complexity of the way the math department were working, simply because you stated that goal, so this is what we're working for. Now, you may feel that you've already designed the program, or at least, forgot what it was called, the first column. Elaine, can you go back?
Right, yeah, I have it.
Thank you. That you've designed the professional learning, the work, which is the metamorphosis, to get to a place that is theoretically possible to get to 95% or 100%. But if you state the goal up front, that this is what you're trying to achieve, then it becomes something that you can speak to. Well, we're not at 95% yet, because it takes time, right? We've moved it from 76 to 78, and frankly, that's statistical noise, right? Because there's going to be a lot of statistical noise in a small district like Irvington. But we can explain that and discuss that, right? But to say that we're not going to measure ourselves at all because we're too afraid of statistical noise, or we don't want to even have it.
I think it comes down to having the right measure.
I guess, Phil, I was with
Afraid
you
is
all the way
wrong
to
word.
that last line. Last line, and you.
Think you're afraid?
Okay. No, that's what I'm saying.
It's not afraid. It's not afraid of statistics. But
I'm happy to measure, and I'm with you on that. And I think one of the reasons why we've made progress is really it's a reflection of the work we've done. That there are things that have been put in place, and there are programs to measure. It's why I always use the math example. There is something to measure now numerically because we've put something in place. So I hear you, and we're happy to find ways to define this in ways that make sense, quite honestly, for you as the Board of Education, but also for our community. There's no big secret here. Like, we're happy for you to see our progress. We're very proud of our progress. And we want to make more, and we're looking to name what we do and how we do it. So I think this is all good. I don't think there's no downside to this conversation or moving forward, or the board having now a strategic plan that we can build underneath. We actually have not had that.
And clearly, I mean, I guess we have,
Great.
in the fall, following up on our discussion from December about student achievement, I think we all agreed that it's gonna look very different next year than it did this year. It's not simply the AP scores or the region scores or the state test scores. But that's the opportunity that you have and that we have, put in the budget to hire a consultant to help with data, to help construct what that might start to look like.
So now, I just want clarity. So are you saying you don't want the performance report?
No, we do. No.
No, but listen, but I don't need you to go through 70 slides at this thing. You can give
I
it,
do.
you can,
I
no,
do.
please, let me finish my sentence. You can give it to us. We can talk about it, but that shouldn't be the focus of a whole meeting. I can look at that on my own. I don't need you to read the
So
AP scores for me.
that all to me almost sounds like another discussion.
Yeah,
So,
so-
that's a
You
whole
just
other
teed it
animal.
into another
Get back
place.
to me on that one.
Yeah.
Just tell me what you want me to do.
So, With that
Well,
said.
I think it was,
Response so desperately.
I'm just saying, because I think we're wrestling on the same point. We're hitting it from different angles.
Just what's the
And we
impact on
hear you,
kids?
we're not afraid of the data. Dave, you hear our angst around using the state assessments as a measure. You know, I just come back to, like, I think, you know, Main Street School and the middle school were reward schools until this year, because now we don't have the participation level to be able to get the award
No,
anymore.
right.
So I'm saying, but what does that say overall? We have a third of our middle school kids that aren't taking the test. So who are those kids? And then it's a whole nother investigation, right?
Right,
So, but it's
one
that
that's worth
idea,
about.
but it's the idea of identifying the data in the right area that tells the story. So, and then that's, we're not afraid of that. And, you know, Raina spoke to 2 examples of work that's been ongoing. We're looking at the elementary K-5 math work that's in year 4 now. We're looking at the world language work that's 2 or 3? 2. And now in 2, all of a sudden, now we're starting to implement these assessments across the board where we'll be able to start to develop data sets.
Right, and then down the road, do you see an increase in the regions, the foreign language regions down the road, right? Maybe.
No, this is, yeah, so no, but yes, we're on the same page.
Right.
They killed those?
They
So-
take, yeah, we don't do the regions.
So
What-
with
you know
respect
what I
to, and this, and for all of our sanity, Raina, I don't know if
Slide
it's
2.
worth referencing, you know, that when we
Oh.
think, as an
Yeah.
example.
Right, so I think as an example of like something looking at what's measurable, and I think, I want to say it was Catherine who went there. So we share with you theory 2, theory of action 2, because theory of action 2 was all about professional development. So this theory's been in place now for 4 or 5 years. And so now, if you look at the next slide, what you can actually see is these were the goals, and these have been the goals. So 100% of our teachers have professional development and in instructional design. 50% of our teachers this year, we offered the next level of work, and 50% of our teachers took advantage of taking a course on teaching thinking. 100% of teachers have participated in RTI training. So I don't need to read these to you.
No, but
But-
just may I make a, again, every time I see one of these slides, it's fantastic, and I love it. I always want to ask the question, what's the impact on students?
Nothing, but that's my, so David, when you say that, it's exactly where I started a while ago. When you say that, I have no evidence. Teaching thinking was this year. I have no evidence that a one-day workshop on teaching thinking translated to student achievement.
So I push back, I push you on that,
Go
Raina,
ahead.
to improve that practice. Because
Well, then you
anytime
have
you
to
invest
say that.
a
But
day.
you're saying 2 different things. So what you're saying here is, so when you devise the goal of teaching thinking, there's a rationale by why you're doing it. So the projected impact that you're seeing is identified when you establish the goal. So the progress update in this implementation of this, and ISO program is a multi-year step. One of the indicators in our progress is that, hey, in year 1, 50% of our teachers, the measure of how that objective related to that, our goal and why we're implementing it, that goal statement related to teaching thinking, we may be able to measure some connect until, 3-4 years out because of that.
Again, just for the, in a collaborative way, right, just to make sure that, because it is a partnership, I want to make sure that that's the tone, is that I push back on that notion that any time you invest anything into any portion of the school, there should be some kind of impact on students every year, not 4 years down the road, not 3 years down the road, but every year.
So we use that as an example. So when I think about we're moving forward, I come to the 4th bullet here, and I made a comment before, is that we got to stop and think about what our focus needs to be and where we're going to. I am not, as your superintendent, I'm in a position where we're just going to keep adding layers and layers of tests and assessment. We got to develop quality measures, and that's what we're doing. Dave, when Raina and I started in our respective roles 5 years ago, we didn't have documented curriculum.
I know.
And what was documented was done in different methodologies, and some was UBD and some was whatever. And there wasn't continuity from classroom to classroom. We had books being taught on the same book being taught multiple times, multiple grade levels. The idea of developing solid, consistent program has been an ongoing process. And it's not buying a package, it is actually sitting with our teachers and our teachers crafting that, and our teachers' voice to that understanding and knowing student needs. And then as we go through this evolution, is that then we're looking at developing those reliable measures. So There's different pieces. It looks differently. We're going to have common assessments that are being implemented in certain courses that are all kids in a given grade level are going to take the same assessment. So when you think about these future initiatives, all of a sudden you can turn and say, bye-bye. So we're not on a different page. The end of the day is that I'm not going to go buy a MAPS test. I'm not going to subscribe to whatever you can name the product, right? We get the same emails. We go to the same workshops. Of course. That when you go and we're not going to go buy stuff for the sake of just doing it and have our kids take more tests. I want our kids thinking. I want our kids learning. I want our kids
100%. We are completely in agreement. Just within that, I just push back on the notion that whatever it is, even if it's in the first stage of development, a year goes by, you still assess kids whether you're putting something in place or not, right? I go back to the example just because when I moved, the same thing, right? There was no curriculum and you put in place the Engage New York curriculum. It was bumpy that first year. The second year was a little less bumpy. We're now in what, the fourth year or the fifth year of the teachers implementing that piece, right? So we should be in a place where we can understand what the impact is of that work, right? We should have been in a place where we could have measured that impact after year 1, after year 2, after year 3, and now say, hey, look, in year 5, we really are like, really, the engines are revving, knowing in partnership, right, that it is a long-term piece, but we can still incrementally take a look at how the kids are doing.
And the only thing I would add is, like, when I look at that slide with the 100%, I mean, when I see it and I see, say, 100% have participated in the BARD writing program, I too would like to see if there's 5 years that followed now, but now this is, end of 2016, we have 100% participation. If year 1 you're saying that we can't measure it, that's fine. Can't measure it, don't know what the impact is. But then we have a chart that says year 2, maybe you can see something. Year 3, we see a little more. Year 4, year 5. But if I don't see that whole overview and 5 years now, but once we get to the 100% mark, I also don't know, looking at this, does that mean we're going to do it again next year, or are we done and now we can start doing the 5-year mark? So that's when Dave talks, that's what I think of.
So, and then I think it comes back to our articulation and naming things in the beginning of the year. And this is all speaking to process. One of the first slides was speaking to the fact that and I'll speak in all honesty and with total transparency, we did our work in spite of the board because the board couldn't tell us what they wanted, couldn't agree on goals, and we worked hard to come to some kind of alignment in the model and approach from the board level. It was hard for us to be able to line continuous work. So now we listen to the degree of harmony and the discussion that existed in the board related to the handbook. And now we're talking about, like, how do we look to employ that in a way that aligns with your leadership's philosophy, aligns with, and then when I say that, it's just not Rain and me, you're going to your principals, how our teachers work in our school district. And now it's looking at how we marry that. And we're not afraid of measurement. We're not afraid of data. The focus then becomes, which areas are we going to measure? What is the data? What does it look shorter term and longer term? And where is it appropriate to start measuring? So we're there, and it's growth process for us here. And I think we're going the right direction. When we, things that we've referenced all along the way, trying to find some support with respect to the data, and you go back to that final budget adoption, it was only a pinch of money as opposed to a whole position that we talked about. Dave gave us a reference. Raina just had a conversation with him this week, or last week, and we're exploring other possibilities that could be here to see what could be a resource to be able to help us. And quite frankly, there's a piece to it that in any kind of partnership, there's learning that happens for us. But aside from the learning, there's people we need to do. And the question is, with say $20,000, how much doing can really be done? Because you can come in and help us understand some maybe things that we don't quite get or haven't had the experience with. But that's good, we have the understanding, but it doesn't buy any of us any more time in our day to do it.
Well, it's more than 20,000.
No, it was an example. I think the number was 40,000 that was there, but.
And clearly it's a priority of the board based on our discussion, so whatever it takes to get it done, I guess, let us know, because we want to support that. It's not a full-time hire this year, but we want to make steps in that direction.
And so then related to this, and this is, I think, where we're kind of, again, wetting palettes, right? And thinking about where we're looking to next year. And this is something where, again, I want to really stress with the board, the management of this. And I would say probably some of the most challenging years that we've had as a board is when we tried to cram I should say as a board, as a leadership team, when we tried to cram presentation after presentation, and we were here until 11 o'clock every single night, we need to run efficient meetings that were done by 9:30 at night. The most highly effective school districts, highly effective boards and administrations, so we own this, really do their business in an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they go home, and they have opportunities for discussion. So with that, I ask for your partnership, and that will be extended to future board members that will be joining us over the summer, that we need to be efficient like that. When we know we have meetings, and Phil, I look to you, and how many times have I heard you impassioned cry to your plea to say, you know what, any longer I'm going home, people. But that idea that we have to be disciplined, we have to be focused. The traditional focus for districts that have 2 meetings a month, there's some that only have 1 a month here and there, is that you have a regular meeting, which is a business meeting. They're efficient, you come in, you may address some ad hoc issues or emergent issues, but you do your business and you go home. Then you have a work session, in a work session, maybe with the exception of some personnel items, your work session is exclusive to this. And we budget time on the areas that are important to us, we focus on that, we dedicate that, and then we move. And we put too much on our plate, too many things before us, we're not gonna do any of them well, and we all know that. So when we slow down and think about where we're going with goals, when we think about presentations, yeah, we could figure out a presentation for every month, but that means we're just not doing something back in the schools, because we have our principals, Raina, myself, whomever, contributing and developing a presentation on something. So as the board begins to think about what those topics are, they should be pertinent topics, things that we can begin to prepare and plan for now on our side. So when we think about some of the things that have been out there, and these are my notes, and I know there were some other ideas that were circulated, Catherine and Michael may have had some ideas, but just generally speaking, this is where we went through our process in the last, I would say, 2 board meetings, and topics and questions that came up as being of importance. So we talk about where we are, and generally speaking, so if we're gonna work, we're thinking September to June, we're thinking 10 months, 20 board meetings, 10 presentations or discussions. We're looking at a 10, and this list in itself exceeds that 10 very easily. So if we're talking about goal presentations, we understand that we can't do everybody in one night as we have. So we're looking at 2 nights. We've had conversation in and around assessment and Ames Web, very linked but different at the same time. So I list that there as a topic for us to think about. Assessment is something we need to talk about in this room. Deb, I remember your commentary, and then I think Dave built upon it. Let's talk about defining rigor, and the aha and the learning that happened is in the last presentation, the TMKS piece started to bring rigor to life for us, right? So we need to have a discussion on that with more practical examples and application of when we talk rigor in Irvington schools, this is what it looks like, and we think we need to dedicate a conversation to that. Then we have that mid-year update, right? We're talking January-ish here. Strategic plan, as I referenced earlier. And then we get in the budget process, and some of that is, wrestling in what we want it to look like. We went from, in my first year, this process that was started in oh my God, I think we almost even started December of my first year. And we went all the way until April with the adoption. And it's ludicrous for us to go into that kind of depth, but at some degree, there was some validity to the need, because as Phil said, there was a lot of repair going on, a lot of communication and education that needed to happen, and I think there's a lot more trust with respect to where we are. But what does that process look like? In my mind, I see 4 meetings here. So we're presenting, where we are from an academic standpoint, from an operational standpoint, proposed budget, and then a tweak. And then in my mind, the adoption is the 5th meeting, but this should be inconsequential. It's, we're already done at that part. End of the year goal updates. And I'm sorry, that K5, 612 should be on the same line. And then kind of where we are today. So, so there may be other topics out there, but I put this out as a very focused piece. And I think where we could say, we want to talk about this, we want to talk about that because it's of interest, I ask you to allow us to be more focused. And in doing so, 2 themes that I think are growing through this, and one of them You know, so how much did we debate, discuss data tonight? We gotta have that assessment conversation in here to have a deeper understanding of what we are actually doing in our schools today. And then the rigor piece, not only is that something that's come up in the room before, we've helped to start to define that, so we need to continue that articulation. But that also, to me, links to strategic plan, because rigor thinks about setting culture and expectation that is woven through the plan. So in my mind, I see these as some real critical topics to address. Certainly, I think the board has that ability to influence priority and others. And again, as we said, kind of in the leading into this, we finalize goals, we finalize this with the full new board, because everybody should be able to contribute. And just kind of an overview here of, you know, where we are to that point of thinking about the number of meetings that we have. You know, down the left side should be our business, our focus. We come in, we do our work. The right-hand side are our work sessions. And this is where we get down and dirty and we have those other discussions. Where I see the nuance, September, to accommodate the goals and accommodate timeline, we need to have those conversations, both meetings in September. When we think about June, we may have to be creative in how that looks, because I don't want us to go in having this type of conversation like we're having now in July or something like that. We need to have that while we're still connected and not losing half a board on vacation or half of an administration on vacation. So.
I think it looks great, Chris. I mean, my only initial comment is, I think that we have to have a work session. I wouldn't put only if needed for my, you know, for my personal vote. I think we need it, and even if it's 40 minutes and it's short and sweet, we should schedule it, and we should all be present to talk about any one of the things that are, because no matter what you list, something is going to pop up that is going to side rail us, right? And we're not going to be able to hit it. So at least if we stay committed to the topics you outlined, that meeting on December 19th will allow us to do it.
And that's what I said, this is your calendar to adopt, and this is actually, this is something that is on the reorg agenda. So when we think about the reorganization meeting, which is scheduled for 6:30 on the 12th, I think, Elaine, right? 6:30 on the 12th, this will be on that agenda. One thing that I do want to say on that note while I'm thinking of it, with new trustees, because it's going to be such a quick turnaround, that I think that there's going to be a need to spend time reviewing what that looks like in advance, so that we go in and the new trustees are comfortable on what's appearing on that, because we're not going to have that opportunity for that orientation session that, say, you and Dave enjoyed in the past year.
And I apologize for not being able to be there on July 12th, so that's the only reason I'm raising it now, is that to the extent you're going to set this calendar, I would vote to keep that December 19th meeting, and I would vote to keep the Board of Ed retreat too, and not go to that on that Saturday.
Unless that Saturday is Martin Luther King
It's a
weekend.
Thursday. The 24th is a Thursday.
No, the 23rd, I think she's talking about.
Where are you saying?
January
It says BOE retreat
January
Saturday.
23rd. That's it, the 23rd is a date.
Is a meeting date, and then the TBD is second.
So
I got it.
And the challenge is, so I want to do, my objective is, and I want us to commit to, we're doing 2 a year. And working together with this board, we've arrived at a place we haven't been in a long while, and I look to Phil as our historian, and that now I think we're in a position where we start to grow, that we expand that dialogue, and you need your administrative team in there. It shouldn't be just the superintendent in there in all these discussions, because we work and operate as a team, and we influence each other's thinking and each other's vision for our work, and quite honestly, we weren't in a position where that would have been productive in the past. We've arrived, and now is the time for that transition. So with that said, you know, we had to pin down a date that looked best for sitting board members, and currently, based upon calendars, 24th looked the best, and but now we're gonna have a transition in the board where we're gonna have 3 new trustees within a month, so we need to go back to try to find out not only what day in and around January works for the board, but also the facilitators that I think we've developed a nice partnership with this year. So,
I was just gonna make a comment that you only have 1 board meeting in February, and is that different?
the holiday calendar.
4 months of only 1 board meeting in a row.
Yeah, I know we have the break. It just seems like that's tough to go from January discussions to 1 meeting in February,
1 in March, 1 in April.
and then you adopt in April. I don't know, it just.
Well, it looks like there needs to be another meeting in March, probably related to budget, right?
Yeah, either that or another one in February, but if you can't do it in February because of the break, right?
Yeah, I mean, my thought with, when it comes to budget is there's so much preliminary information that will change when we hear it in February,
Right.
that I
that's-
prefer to,
I agree with.
what's that?
It's really the crunch time, so it's
Yeah.
calculations.
Yeah, so for our purposes, March is really when we
To
have
have a third one.
Spent too
Yeah.
much in February, I get
Right.
really nervous.
Then we have to, well, that's,
And
in
we have to
fact, we
revisit
keep,
it all.
you know, 2 years ago, we were hearing a horror story in February, and then by the time we got to the end, it was like, oh, well, the story's very different, so why,
Yeah, yeah.
Right, because the budget adoption on the 10th is almost, unless you put one the week after, because that will be a hard date.
Yeah.
right, so we have to squeeze them in probably in March.
Yeah, March looks like it, because I'm looking at the calendar now, so you have a meeting, you know, I don't have the board meetings on my calendar yet, but when you look at February 6th, and then we would be doing meetings back to back, and then we have a week off, and then you come back for the 27th, clearly I gotta tell you, when we do it, and we've done it a couple of years, you come back and you have a meeting right after break, it's torturous for us because people are preparing for a board meeting rather than being on vacation, or rather than being able to rest, and I gotta tell you, it's very stressful.
Well, I think they're
So-
saying that finding another time in March, probably between March 20th and April 10th, right?
Right.
Well, there's a week that a break is early.
Oh, there's a break in between March 20th and April 10th, is what you're saying.
Right, because I think the break is what, the first week in April?
It's the first week of April, yeah.
March 30th.
Spring break, that's right.
Yeah. So what I ask, we're not solving it at the moment.
Right.
What I ask, and, you know, maybe it can be another one of your legacies, Phil. Someone, go back, if you have ideas for that, shoot Elaine and me an email. The four of us will put our heads together and thinking if there's some way of altering some of this. But a part of it is, we gotta be practical, and if we're gonna meet, it needs to be for a purpose. And, you know, Deb shared that idea, and the December example, that when we look at that, you know, maybe that's that great opportunity to come and say, we're having a 1-hour meeting on this topic.
In December this year, we had one meeting.
It's my son's.
Yeah.
What,
And
19th.
when you adopt this, it doesn't
7
mean
days older
that
than me,
when
yes.
we get to March, we can't
7
say,
days older
you
than
know, we do need a meeting.
Right.
Right.
And then you just approve another meeting date.
That's right.
You know,
Right.
and that will,
Was there.
you know, probably be a little bit more efficient given what's going on at the time.
And hopefully, by shifting it, that gives the principals and administration more time to assess the needs with budget, what their asks might be, and to prepare presentations for March.
Good.
I mean, you know, so I think, well, we lost you guys a bit, but I think, I mean, obviously with the list that Dr. Harrison has just shared with us on the prior slide, there's been so many other things thrown at us, and none of those things are on that list. We have to really come to terms with that. I guess that's one question I have, is that there's been a view in this community that the board can tackle a whole number of things that are not on that list, and we have to make clear that what are the things that we're prepared to address during the year.
So we think about, like, this is like the optics of our work, and this is kind of like the side job in so to speak, right? The work is what happens during the day, what happens in the classroom, and being in education, just so happens the opportunity for our communication, our meetings, a lot of it happens at night. So this is kind of like the second job in some ways. So there's so much work that goes on that you never see. And I just want to say that we have to be mindful. I need for myself, I need for my team to be able to be very, very focused. And just right out of the box, there's a couple really big things that's going to engage lots of people to be able to get it done, and things that are I think going to be priorities and commitments for the board. And so the strategic plan, isn't Chris sitting at his desk at home on a weekend typing away? As we're looking to have that document evolve to meet the expectations that our community should have for it, that's going to be ongoing work with layers of people throughout our district. When we think about, we have a website that we are going to hit our targets on delivering upon for this year because of how we extended the process for the logo, and rightfully so. We have a good product, we're moving ahead, but what's gonna be involved in that? And that's gonna be something, and it's gonna be a smaller segment of people, but there's gonna be a segment of people, because there's gonna be work with the board communications committee, but there's gonna be a lot of work with administrators and people getting trained behind the scenes and populating, developing, improving pages and writing copy for pages. And then as we foreshadowed along the way, I think we're gonna be jumping into a very large-scale bond development process and beginning to look at that. And if we're gonna try to think about what our strategy is gonna be, how we're gonna hit sequence of expiring notes that exist today, we need to plan and prepare that now so that we can have a bond vote, and by the time we borrow money, it's when other debt is expiring, so we can try to minimize or eliminate any impact on our community. So, there's like, and that's just now, it's not like that creative, relaxing brainstorm time of where we're going. That's just the practical of what's happening, and those 3 projects, when I look from my seat, are massive, they're deep, and they're very involved. So, while that's happening, there's the operations of your school district, there's the development of budget, which is hundreds and hundreds of hours for us. There's, transportation, which might be a little report here. Carol's leading a work group there on top of all those other things that she's gonna be involved in. So there's layers. So to Michael's point, I think constraint and focus needs to be our key, and it's gonna allow us as a team to be successful, but you're gonna allow me to be able to collaborate much more effectively with everybody in the district to get the work done.
Yeah, I mean, what I would add to that, though, is that if that's what we're doing as a board, we need to know that for the community, when they have a concern and they go to their school building, when they go to Main Street School or the middle school, that there's a process or an opportunity for issues that need to be addressed, to be handled at the school level effectively without needing to involve the board. So I think that's something that we'll probably have to circle back and discuss at some future point.
And it depends on what they are, whether they become board issues, whether they're local issues, and I think we have to define whatever that looks like.
Well, I think a lot of issues come to us that are a building-based issue, but end up on our lap, and I think we need to figure out that those building-based issues can be addressed.
They should be.
There.
Well, you know what, you're elected officials, so you're the unofficial complaint department.
Yes.
That gives me a thought. You said something before, Phil, about town halls and what Rain had done was really effective around the Common Core. Maybe we could do something like that. And I'm thinking about different streams of work as you sort of surface different priorities and whatnot. And I know, it's tied to the strategic plan, it's tied to your theories of action. That curriculum is a big piece, right? So not that this is another stream of work, but a way to tackle these little streams of work, maybe through these little town hall moments where we say, like I would love, for example, we had a beautiful presentation Raina gave in September, unveiled this wonderful piece of work that's been 4 years in the making, right? That doesn't go away. You guys keep alluding, and we all know that it's an ongoing, living, breathing document, and it's constant. And wouldn't it be nice if, instead of dedicating a meeting or a huge, long discussion, that there was like a one afternoon or one evening town hall where we said, wow, we showed you this last year, we did a whole bunch of work over the summer, come to visit the site now, let me take you on a tour. Boom, we've now the discussion, now anything that might surface can take it to another level if it needs to go.
And I made note of it, and it's an idea, I think, to develop on a lot of different levels. And I can say, when I think of some of my work here in district, one thing that I really enjoyed and was a great touch point for the community was book clubs. And I think I've done 4 or 5 years, and honestly didn't have the availability, the time to be able to do it. So when we think about adding extra nights, step back sometime and go home and flip through the district calendar. And there's things that are going on here almost every single night of the week. And we literally sit as an administrative team, how many rounds we go around. And like, we just had at our administrative council meeting on Thursday, spent a half hour negotiating like a dozen conflicts that were still remaining. So it's difficult to fit all those pieces together in the year. But you're in my to-do list, it's one of the hot items to consider, so.
Just a way to save time.
Well, I mean, we haven't even, on that list, we don't see a building-based but significant initiative, which is the high school master plan. And for the moment, that hasn't come in front of the board, and only if you've been able to attend the discussion do you have any real knowledge about it. So we need to you know, that confidence that, you guys have got this, that there's good communication happening, and that, with students and parents and community, that they are well aware, and that there's no, you know, the idea of changing the schedule can be scary for some people, and we need to know that there's a good process, and that doesn't necessarily need to come before us, but
Oh,
hopefully.
I think
No,
that
I mean,
actually does,
each and
yeah.
every time, though,
Well,
right?
not every time, but I definitely think that has to be one of the scheduled presentations in the fall.
Well, it wasn't on the
What-
list, so
So what
that's the
has
kind
to
of thing we have to look at.
Right.
So, but I think that, I don't know that, maybe to Dave's point, I don't know that that's a board meeting.
Right.
I think that's another night, because to the point, you can't fit everything in. And that, you know, that we're in the process of scheduling at least 2 specific scheduled presentation. One that, again, Dave and Matt, and another that is Mike Reddick, our scheduling pro, coming in and working through process and educating community. So we already have 2 that are, I think, on the calendar as it stands now. I think it's 2, or maybe 3.
Not on the calendar.
Or,
yet,
but in the
yes,
planning to
in
be
the
on,
plan,
it's
yes.
not advertised, but I'm saying
Right.
it's in the works.
Why wouldn't that be a board meeting for Dave to present what he's planning to do to the high school schedule?
Because we have 3 people here.
I would say the idea is it's an educational topic, and it's a learning session. And that the idea, we're sitting here and we're looking at a series of how many available nights. So if we're looking to do it then, what are we doing in lieu of? And I think that idea of having the discussion in the forum and doing so in an alternate evening, I think is accomplishing the same objective.
I think academic performance of students is one of the objectives of the board. So I think that falls into monitoring academic performance of the district and the students.
That's, I think, where we are.
But I guess, so that's it, what, we will see this again in,
And we're
July
gonna
at the
play,
reorg,
with these
and we
calendar
can-
dates.
You'll play with it, and we'll have some new members, and I think, you know, if we wanna pull it out and discuss it at the reorg, in terms of, you know, where things stand, we can sort of
I
say,
think-
this is the schedule, right?
I think that at the reorg, you adopt the calendar.
Right.
We don't have to adopt the exact sequence of what the meeting's
Right.
schedule is.
Right, and as Elaine has pointed out, things can change. So-
Yep.
Collaborative team.
All right. Very good.
It is.
So Carol. All right, 9:30, is that curfew?
I mean, I guess, to the point of we're going on our 4th, presentation, how do we avoid these discussions? I mean, this presentation's not on our list.
Well, and I gotta say, it wasn't, I think this is one of those things, to maybe Deb's point, that there's things that come up during the year. I can tell you what Carol is about, right? The handbook is something that became an ad hoc effort. This discussion is the first time we've engaged in this as we have, and the
In this
linkage of the
way.
2 were one heavy-duty conversation. What Carol's about to do now is a couple-minute thing, and we've had this conversation in the past, but we've never had it with the degree of detail that Carol brings to her work. Not to say anything, Bev did a wonderful job, but I'm saying we haven't had this conversation in this way.
All right, that's
Go Carol.
That's a lot to follow, but, all right, so basically,
You want me to click?
fund balance and reserves is a topic that, you know, does get kind of complicated within the financial world, so I'm just gonna try to do the simplification of it.
Can I just make a suggestion? Carol, you want to just make sure that mic is close and,
Okay, so that's good.
yeah.
Okay, recognizing that it's late and I don't feel like standing. So there's 2 different categories of fund balance, basically. One is what I would call the unassigned, and then I would call reserves. So you have fund balance and then you have reserves. Fund balance, you have unassigned, which is basically you can use that for anything. There's no restrictions to it, you just kind of have that. The Office of State Controller has basically recommended we keep 4% of next year's budget. That is a guideline for a healthy school district. You get cited if you have too little, and you get cited if you have too much.
So really, you're inviting an audit either way if you don't have that 4%.
What's the process if we had to dip into the fund balance in a given year?
Then we do. I mean, that's
Is
why you have
literally
it.
just a budget transfer
Right.
that's
It
approved
would-
by the board?
It would be an
Didn't
amendment.
we do
a
it this
budget
year,
amendment.
or last year? Maybe it was last year.
We have not had to do that, not.
This year,
Not
the
this year.
prior year.
No. So then the other category is appropriated fund balance. So this is basically what I would call assigned fund balance. So you'll hear that word a lot. You'll hear that word, unassigned, assigned, and then restricted. So assigned is, okay, we've assigned, $422,000 to go to next year's budget as a revenue source. We've assigned anything that we have as an appropriation for next year, carryover encumbrance. That is an assigned fund balance. It has a specific purpose. And then finally, you have your last category, which is your reserve funds, and that is your restricted piece. Those are restricted for specific purposes, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, and also there's these GASB terms, so that's why I'm kind of using the words restricted, assigned, and unassigned, because those are the GASB terms that you'll read about when you get to the financial statements.
Does everyone know what GASB are?
GASB is the Government Accounting Standards Board, so, and they like to make trouble. They have all this, they follow the Financial Accounting Standards Board, so they feel like they have to do something different every year, and they changed all the language a little while ago. The reserve categories, we have the following reserves. We have a tax cert reserve, okay, we have a capital fund reserve, we have a workers' comp reserve, and we have I'll call an EBLAR, or Employee Benefits Accrued Liability Reserve. That's a big term, we just call it EBLAR. Doesn't even really make sense because of the way we have it, but that's. Now, there are other ones that are allowed, you can have, okay, you could have one for ERS, and ERS is like for holding your pension contributions, a district share. We could have one for insurance, small amount for insurance. It's a very limited amount, a lot of rules. We could have one for repairs, again, a lot of rules, property loss. These are all small things you can have in unemployment. If you thought you were going to have a situation with big layoffs, you might actually create an unemployment reserve. There's a lot of rules. ERS might be something we might want to consider at some point. There's also some legislation pending right now for TRS, which would make sense.
And I would say, when you get into those, and I'm sorry to jump on you, but the pension things, I think, are something critical for us to contemplate in the future, should there be resources to be able to contribute. Because what it does do, it prevents, when you think about, we can't control pension rates and our contribution. So when you see these big swings, when you see dips, that's great, it helps us get through to the next year. But if all of a sudden you have a spike, well, what does that mean? If the spike takes you beyond the tax cap, do you have layoffs, do you have cuts to deliver? But if you have this reserve, it helps you to kind of weather that storm, to contribute more in that year in the hopes that you can manage some of that, so you're not laying people off or cutting programs.
CRS is calculated, the pension is on a 3-year rolling average, is that right?
Five-year investment average. And that's the 85 to 90% of the fund is investment based.
Right.
Believe it or not, it's really not what we contribute.
And that's something that did spike several years ago and
Sure.
really hit us
Mhm.
hard.
Yeah.
And it came down
a lot of
nicely
districts are.
this year.
So again, and there's rules with all of these reserves, all of them very specific. Example for a tax cert, well, I'll talk about tax cert in a second, so I'll go on to that one. Let's see. So how do you create fund balance? You create fund balance by, at the end of the year, most districts will end with a surplus. You never budget to the penny. You don't want to end with a deficit. That does happen. If you end with a deficit, you might be going into your 4%, your reserves. Sometimes we borrow to put money in a reserve. We did that with tax certs not too long ago. Some districts will actually sell buildings or land that's in excess, and they can put that money into a reserve. And if you actually had a capital project that was not over budget, which is very rare, then you might actually end up with money for a reserve also. All right. Why have fund balance? Again, as I said before, if you don't have it, the Office of State Controller is going to tell you that you're not healthy. You're in fiscal stress. If you have too much, they're going to cite you on that as well. You're taking too much taxpayers' money and you're holding it. So you have to be careful with that. But you definitely do need to keep that 4%. We used to be allowed to have a lot more. The 4% happened, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. I forget exactly what time frame. But we used to be able to count more, but there was some pushback on that, so they settled on this number. Many business officials think it is still too low. It's from a cash flow point of view, it can be considered low, and from a planning point of view, without some of those other reserves that Dr. Harrison was saying, it's very difficult to manage sometimes, but.
The town of Irvington actually has a unassigned fund balance of 20%.
Right, and, most businesses would have a lot more. You would never operate a business with 4%, but it's taxpayer money, it's public money, these are the rules, so I won't really comment. It is what it is, we deal with it. Cash flow, if you have some reserves, you can help manage your cash flow. You can borrow from funds as long as you're paying that fund back within a certain period of time. You can never borrow for very long, but you can move money from one fund to another with what's called due to, froms, and we do that all the time. So this time of year, we're going to be getting into August where we don't have much cash flow, September. I remember last year it was really tight, with money, and then you pay it back to yourself, though, so you're not borrowing. And when you are thinking about a capital project, if you don't have a decent level of reserves, you're going to have a higher interest rate that they're going to charge you for. So those are all reasons why you want to keep some fund balance. Our largest reserve right now is tax certs, so I just thought I would briefly talk about that one. We're currently at about $1.3 million, which is, I guess, pretty good. You have to keep in mind that money's going in and out of this reserve every year. So if you're putting money in a tax cert reserve, you also must use that reserve for that purpose. So when we do have tax tertiary refunds, we are actually then funding it out of that reserve. And then at the end of the year, we're hopefully adding more money back into it. So based on whatever surplus we might generate. So it is a up and down kind of thing.
If I remember correctly, at the end of last year, it was maybe $1 million less than it is now. Did we add quite a bit at the end?
It was more than that, but that's because we had the borrowing. It was almost $3 million over a year ago, but because we had put the money from the borrowing in it. And then last year, we had actually a large number of tax cert cases that was.
Because there was, I remember a document that was provided that showed it being depleted, nearly depleted at a certain point, but that might have just been a period of time.
We did expense a lot last year.
Yeah.
Almost $2.5 million came out of it last year. So it was going down. You have to be able to show an auditor that you have exposure in order to have this reserve. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to put money here. You have to show that you have it, and the auditors will look at that. The report that we get from Ingram & Smith identified about $20 million in just the filings alone. So when they file, sometimes they'll say, I want $1 assessment. That includes all of that. I want to reduce my assessment to $1, which is obviously ludicrous, so you can't really look at that completely. But when I look through it and look through what settlements have happened, I come up with a number that's closer to, maybe $5 million, somewhere in that $5 million, $6 million range. It's a little difficult to do because you have to look at what years things were lined up, and it's not an exact science, but we could easily show we have a liability of about $5 to $6 million here. And we should plan for that, because if we don't know, that could happen. As I said, we did borrow in 2012-13 with that addition of almost $3.6 million. That helped boost the reserve. And this will be our last year of paying that off. So that's a good thing for us, because now we're in that position where that money that are not spending for that interest can either go into this reserve next year or in one of our other reserves. And then we have that available to us. And I do recommend maintaining about this level or maybe a little more in the future. That would be my recommendation. So if you're looking at our current fund balance position, would be coming from our audited statements from 2015-16 that we ended last year with. These are our balances, so it's about $6.1 million of total restricted, unrestricted, and appropriated, or assigned, unassigned, and restricted. The right GASB terms here. Going to next year. Again, I would recommend you start with by funding your 4%. We don't want to invite any issues with the Office of State Controller. And by the way, how do they know about it? Through all of our financial reports at the year end. They certainly do look at this. That's something we report as part of our ST3 documents. So they do obviously know all of our numbers. I would recommend adding approximately $150,000 to our workers' comp reserve. That would give us some flexibility should we decide to choose to rejoin the cooperative and get out of that self-insured business. Something we should look forward to doing in the coming year or two. And we had started that capital fund reserve last year. I would recommend trying to keep that momentum going. We are thinking about doing a future project, so that would be something that would be beneficial to us. And then any remaining money, I would say then we should probably add to the tax reserve. And these, again, are my recommendations, not something we have to do. It's hard to quite know exactly the numbers are gonna be, but, because, you haven't finalized the year yet, but we're working on that. But these are the estimates I think we may be able to achieve.
Last year, we had a resolution. Is there a resolution?
There is a resolution, that's why I'm doing this presentation,
Yeah.
because you're gonna vote on that
Just wanted to make
resolution.
sure that, yeah.
Right. You don't have to be that specific in the resolution, you just have to say what you're going to fund, that you're gonna, the 4% should be in the resolution, and that is in there. The other piece of the resolution just says you're gonna put money into the other 3 reserves. You don't have to be that specific. You can be if you really want to, or you can be a little bit more flexible, because I don't really know the exact numbers.
Yeah, and I think after you close the books, the audit's completed, so the numbers are verified, then the formal recommendation will come down.
Yeah, so I'll be back with you on that one. And so if that was the case, and we were able to put all those things in as I predict, which there's no exact crystal ball yet, although I've done some work to figure this out, this is about where we would end up. I chose to make the net change numbers, more round, and obviously come up with some crazy number on the middle column, but it gives you an idea of where we would be. I'm not saying these are our numbers, please, look at this as completely projected and illustrated, but, so, it would be very close to what we have this year, which would be a good position, a strong position for us. You want to try to maintain your level as best you can, but recognize you're going to need some. We are looking to pull some out of the EBLAR this year. We have some claims that we do need to use this year. And if you also don't ever use that reserve, the auditors would look at you and say, well, you've never used it, why do you have it? So again, you're supposed to use reserves for the purposes that they're intended, and not just kind of hold it at taxpayers' money. So we did expect some this year with some retirements, and we will be using that, so.
And the reserve for encumbrances last year was so significant.
A lot had to do with the capital project.
Right.
And some of the work that was going on to support the capital project, things we couldn't necessarily get to. I anticipated being a little bit lower this year, so I think we're in a better place. It may not even be quite that high, I'm not really sure yet. One of those ones that's a little tricky, and being my first year, I'm not really having a great feel for that yet, so I'll see.
And ultimately, that's just about timing anyway.
Right. But again, if that number is higher, then the surplus might be a little bit lower or higher, so then I would have other monies. It kind of all flows through together, so. But that's kind of where I see it may be happening. But pretty much a level amount, which would be good for us.
And the change in the workers' compensation from the 190 to 340, is that based on what our expected liabilities are there, or?
So it's twofold. We technically, we could be using our reserve this year to pay some of our claims that we have. I'm trying to see if I can't fund that without doing that, because I'd like to hold the money in the reserve so that we could then maybe buy back into a cooperative. And if we do that, we will need funds to be able to pay what's called tail claims. Tail claims are those that are existing when you move into either a new insurance program or a new cooperative. They're never going to take those existing claims, so you need to be able to fund that, and that's what this reserve would do. So what we'd be able to fund in our budget would be just the new premium or the new, our share of the cooperative, but we would use this funds to fund that tail claim. So I have to have a little bit of reserve in order to be able to recommend that to you.
So it is based on our expected liability there?
Yeah. And what could happen in the future, because again, we're self-insured, so we have to have some basis for protecting ourselves there. Any other questions? I know it's a lot, this was just kind of a primer, but.
Thank you.
And I will get you updated as I see the numbers unfolding now in the next month.
I appreciate it, it's very clear.
Very.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
We're on agenda now.
That brings us to the adoption of the NISBA resolution. So, I guess we should take a vote on it, is that what we should do?
Mm-hmm.
All right, may I have a motion to approve the adoption of the NISBA resolution?
So moved.
Oh, I thought it was Phil who was going to move again.
Oh, no, my mistake. Go ahead, Phil.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so on the consent agenda, is there anything anybody wishes to discuss or to pull out of the consent agenda before we vote on it? Anything anybody wants to note? Chris?
What's that I'm flipping through? There's a number of wonderful new faculty and staff members that we're appointing this evening. I have to say that, speaking to Dr. Core and myself, we're very enthusiastic about the caliber of the individuals. Folks that bring with them tremendous passion, skill, and experience. The large part, most of them are coming to us with some great experiences, many of which we're always proud to say how we're stealing great folks from the city. And so, you know, we certainly want, there's many of them, but we want to welcome each of them. We're real excited to have them join our team here in Irvington. The one item 10.1 that I think is worth drawing attention to, that we've always had Mr. Lubinsky functioning as in a lead role in technology, but we're actually making it an official administrative position. By doing so, it gives the opportunity for to have more flexibility in our work with Jesse, but it also allows Jesse to take on a wider array of responsibilities, such as evaluating and observing staff, actually having ownership over more budgetary and planning components than he would be permitted otherwise.
And just to be clear, before he was a teacher on special assignment.
Correct. Correct. So we will, with this creation, we'll have a posting that'll go out. And the assumption, and I say this, the assumption that Mr. Lubinsky will apply. And then in doing so, then there would be the abolishment of the current teacher on assignment position. And then there's a series of donations that do exist. Donation to Scott Mosenthal Scholarship Fund. One exciting partnership that one of our high school students, Ben Hunt, for his Eagle Scout project. He is actually in the World War I Memorial or Monument on the Main Street lawn, is actually worked with the designers for the Villages work, and is going to install a paver pathway leading from the sidewalk up and around the monument, and that is, of course, supported by the Buildings and Grounds Committee, who reviewed the plans. We have reviewed it with the Village of Irvington, who is supportive of the plan as well. Of course, thanking the PTSA for funding four fantastic grants that are out there, and the awarding of some contracts for this year. And I think that's about it, Ms. Palmieri.
All right. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
All right, so now where are we? I've lost track on this donation, year-end fund balance. So we have to vote on the year-end fund balance? Is that a separate vote, or is that?
That's part of,
It was consent. And Elaine, I
Okay.
just want to make note, number 1111, did you remove that from the agenda? Only because technology support services, the bids are still being reviewed for that. And so there was a blank line. Yeah, we just caught that.
That was my mistake.
The transportation agreement that I was reading through,
That would be in July.
yeah, no, I just saw it in the agenda. I just,
Transportation.
yeah, there was,
That was.
Do you want to see it in
Tell-
the hard
tell the
copy?
number?
no, it just sparked me to remind me to mention, I drive to work very early at 6:15 in the morning, and I drive right past that bus at 6:30 in the morning every day.
We just got the CPI number, the contracts are just going out.
I was just checking.
Yeah, we have to remove 1111, I'm sorry.
All right, so,
Do we need to read a new resolution?
all right, so,
Just reorder the consent agenda. Yeah.
so re-vote on the consent agenda with removing that?
Yeah.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of 1111?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right, aye.
I apologize.
How dare you?
Okay, and now that brings us to our second phase of community comments. Does anyone have anything to say?
Hello, Maria Kashkin. My comments are about the handbook that you guys created, and I actually think it's fantastic. A great guide, easy to read, easy to follow. But forgive me, because I thought this was going to happen earlier. On one of the points, questions and comments from the community. There was 3 minutes, all of that. Oh, forgive me.
Which section is that?
I'm looking right now.
The section related to,
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyway, it was about comments about people asking questions and then the board not, or the administration not answering them. I kind of wanted to know why. If someone came here to ask a very simple question that could be answered, why is it in this handbook that there will be no response?
I'm sorry, but I can't answer that.
Okay, it's under C, page
that was
12,
just a-
number
that's a
6.
joke.
You're the BOE president.
I'm sorry, number 7, number 7.
I will direct the governance team handbook to look into that matter further and respond at the next meeting.
You know, I think a matter of it is, Maria, the practical is just, and here's the example of the engagement, that it's certainly something to look further into, but the practical side of it is that the idea of it is the opportunity for hearing to the public, and it's a public comment, and it isn't designed to be a dialogue. So the thought is that it typically, as you know, when there's opportunity for us to be able to give a quick answer, the chair gives consent for administration of the board to answer. But generally, we don't want to be obligated, the board doesn't want to be obligated to have to be able to answer every question, because generally speaking, many questions require additional work or processing to satisfy.
Okay, so would the board consider changing that language and maybe including that there won't be a dialogue, you know, if it's a simple question? I mean, I don't know off the top of my head how you reword it, but the way it's written here kind of gives one the feeling that you come here, you can ask your question, almost like you don't want people to ask questions. That's my take when you're reading this, because if you're going to just ask a question, if you're here and you're not going to answer it, it just doesn't seem like it's collaborative. You know, I don't know. It just,
Can I answer?
Go ahead, please do.
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay.
But I will acknowledge that it's a good point, and we will take it under advisement when we, because remember, this is a draft, so.
yep, and I just wanted to share my comments. Thank you very much.
It was worded in that way because the board president is in charge of her meeting, and what we don't want, which has definitely happened in the past, is board members like me right now, all of a sudden sort of interjecting.
And I
I will
believe,
never do it again.
I believe at one point you talked about Robert's rules, though, that this is, you know, this is an open meeting, and it's really not intended to be an open discussion. It's really that we're having the discussion and it's public so that the public can listen into the discussion, but it wasn't intended to be an ongoing dialogue. And I think that's the intent of this message here.
Okay,
that
because
it's-
with Robert's rules, there's public meetings, and then there's also work sessions, which is more of a listen and no comments, but perhaps maybe you would look into other language, you know, not a dialogue, but, so thank you for the explanation.
I don't know, did we ever explain where we even got this from? Did you explain that in the last meeting? So, I mean, practically nobody's watching, but you guys are here. So this came from, largely from other school boards around the county, around the state, as well as via our team that helps us in our retreats. So that's consists of a guy who was a superintendent, Ken Mitchell, and Susan Wolin, who is president of the Bedford School District and a longtime school district member, and somebody who's been in this very active in school district, in school board activities in Bedford for a long time. The point is that this is a distillation of many, many different policies, and largely consistent with what NYSBA has as a policy for all its districts across the state. Some of the language may seem very officious and maybe overly harsh, but that's why we go through an editing process to kind of soften it here and there. But the important thing is being clear to the board and to the community about what are our standards on this board and how we're going to operate going forward.
Well, and actually, to that point, one of the other things I did notice, and I, is that something we're going to implement going forward? Number 3, a signage.
It was actually something that Michael had highlighted in one of his comments.
And I remember highlighting as well.
Right, so we
Is
just
that-
haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay, okay,
Best
good,
practice.
all right.
Best practice.
Yes, Della.
Well, at your discretion, 'cause, great job on the draft. I agree with Maria. Maybe some dialogue on part of our strategic plan and the community involvement. Maybe if this isn't the forum, maybe we could provide a forum to hear from the community in a, where it's more open dialogue, where more community members can have a voice and just understand how to go about it. And if this isn't the forum, providing it, because that is one of our strategic plans, vision, goals. So looking at all your goals, you might want to consider that. But I haven't read through it all yet, but what I've read so far, it's excellent. My concerns are the same thing with Maria. Because it's a balance between following the rules and, we are a small district and we rely on the community and communication and kind of like having a basic understanding and not holding everybody to the strict guidelines, but great job with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We could have 100% participation if one more person.
Got up to the microphone.
No peer pressure.
Just kidding, Maura. Okay.
I did have one, go ahead.
I was just going to thank our board president.
Can I just ask a question that's,
Oh.
and then it sounds like you're gonna have a nice closing
Yes,
statement.
please, go ahead.
I think even before I joined the board, there was a period of time in which there were a number of students hit by cars, and that in turn became a community concern that's been addressed by a number of different initiatives. But one thing that was a part of trying to improve things, and I think even went through the state and was approved and has funding, was to enhance the crosswalk.
Heritage Hill and Broadway.
Heritage Hill. So I was just wondering if you could potentially follow up with the village to see,
Talked to him,
okay.
Yeah.
and he said that they have gone out to bid, I think.
The village has gone, they have the plans, they've gone out to bid. And we've worked closely with them. We've had the opportunity to give feedback on the village's design. And their intent is to have the work done over the summer, because when we look at that project, we look at the Aqueduct project, we have significant concerns about traffic and impacts on school operations. So the villages always are being great partners. And their hope is that that'll be done this summer.
I think DOT threw them a little bit of a curveball on something, though,
Okay.
that delayed them a little bit, but they are moving along.
Great, thank you.
I'm mindful that they want to do this in the summer.
Wonderful, I appreciate that.
Do you have one more
I
comment?
just had one more question, if you don't mind, or comment. One thing, first I wanted to point out, I looked at, just a follow-up, because it's been so long, just a follow-up on the measuring. I actually took the statistics of all of our scoring from year to year, and having the 5-year and measuring, like Rain had pointed out, when kids are opting out, who is opting out. So we had a spike of 80% going from 40%. So why is it the opting out? So I think looking at the measurements and looking at the long term and understanding what's influencing these patterns, or we could see a spike, and we can look into why has that happened. And my other thing was, it's not a one-to-one. It's not a long-term goal and a short-term goal. So when you're looking at student achievement, you could have multiple goals, whether it's community-related and parent feedback, teacher feedback, whatever it is. You could tie those long-term goals into different short-term goals. So I don't think it's one-to-one. So.
Okay, thank you.
So may I say thank you to you? Because this is your last board meeting of this year, so that's appropriate to say thank you
Oh, well, thank you.
as board president, because I know how hard it is. It's truly a thankless task, and for those of you who may consider being board president someday, it's about 4 to 5x the typical board trustee amount of time. I figured it out once. So we all should give Catherine a well-deserved thank you.
And that doesn't even count the planting the bushes. Okay, the next public meeting is going to be Wednesday, July 12th. Oh, no, Tuesday, July 11th. No, meeting will be held Wednesday, July 12th at 6:30 in the
Special
campus.
election.
Because the election's July 11th.
Are we going back into executive?
So may I have a motion to adjourn? Are we going back into executive?
Do we want to recap?
I think so.
If we could
Yes,
do,
I
if
think.
we promise
Okay.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Motion
What,
to
did Nick-
adjourn into executive.
Nick,
Sorry, we gotta finish the we just
yeah,
gotta
we were
finish the
not,
process.
yeah, you can't, no.
Motion.
We got-
Oh,
for purposes
so
of
moved.
discussion, negotiation. Second.
All in
Collective
favor?
bargaining.
Aye.
All right.